If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
For those who drive overnight through forests, deep woods, and haunted roads, what is the scariest paranormal being or creature, like Bigfoot or a Wendigo, you have seen?
What I saw when I was driving in 2007 to 2008. I'm watching a documentary on Bigfoot right now. I realized that I had encountered some strange experiences in the past, but a story featured in the documentary reminded me of an incident from my college days. I was driving back from a weekend of snowboarding. I was heading north from the Lake Tahoe area. It's mountain roads, lots of curves and turns. I round a turn to a half-mile long slightly curved stretch. My headlights light up a man walking down the side of the road going the direction we were traveling. I keep my speed up, going about 50 to 70 miles per hour, but move into the center of the road, as there were no other cars around. I can't remember if this was a snowy trip back or a clear trip. There were many of both, as my friends and I went quite often, but it was at night, probably 5 to 7 p.m. All I remember further is the guy turned around to face into the headlights as we were within 30 yards, and he had this crazy face. It was not a human face. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I saw something once while delivering pizzas. So I was 19. I worked for Papa John's, and mind you, I was in South Carolina, and I tell you that because if it has any significance in helping identify what I saw. I was delivering pizzas, and it was probably 11:30 p.m., one of the last deliveries of the night. I'm on a road that has a field on both sides at the top of a hill and houses further down at the intersection. No streetlights. I was driving my 2000 Toyota Celica GT, and I saw movement, like somebody was walking across the road. I had my high beams on, and I slammed my brakes. As soon as I did, whatever it was turned its head, and I could tell it was female by the way it was walking. It was a humanoid, standing upright on both legs. It whipped its head around, and its eyes widened like, oh shit. They were golden yellow, with dark pupils that widened as we locked eyes. I blinked, and when I opened them again, I saw a very quick movement to the other side of the road, and then all was still again, and I was sitting in the middle of this road dumbfounded at what I had just experienced. With the lights on, though, I could make out that it was wearing clothing of some kind, but it was dark clothing, and no skin was exposed that I could see. The face was almost shrouded in shadows, and I caught the eyes and parts of the cheeks. It moved with superhuman speed, but when I saw the movement and initially stopped, it was as if it was moving with the pace of a fast walk, just trying to cross the road. Its height was about one head taller than the top of my car, so about the average American female. But what I encountered was not human. Based on what I've told you, what could it have been? Had a lot of weird experiences on a cross-country road trip. My boyfriend and I went on a cross-country road trip for a month. We converted a minivan and slept at a lot of dispersed and free camping spots, so we were out in the middle of nowhere most of the time. We had many weird experiences and are trying to figure out what happened and if we should be worried. Here is what we documented. The Muddy Creek Road in Colorado evoked an eerie feeling. Woke up in the middle of the night and left. Felt like something was watching us. The silence in Mesa Verde, Colorado, was deafening, and we felt uneasy in the vicinity of religious sites. Red dots on my arm, they went away the second we left. Abandoned gas near Capitol Reef, Utah, blurry photos, creepy feeling, multiple screams coming from one source, and birds were going insane. Don't feel comfortable talking about it. Joshua Tree, California, scratching on the van and human footsteps around that my BF could barely hear, but I could hear clearly. Coyote calls but no tracks. Distinct feeling of loss. Sense that if we looked out the window, something bad would happen. Tetons, Wyoming, flat tire when we got to our campsite. Couldn't sleep with a weird uneasy feeling, and my skin hurt to touch the second I got in the van. Coyotes began to call around 12. Sounded like they were fighting something. I started talking in my sleep around 1 a.m. We really didn't want to turn our backs to the windows. Heard something hitting the back of the car multiple times and footsteps all around the van. Strange noises and talking. When my BF woke me up to leave, I was convinced people were at our campsite. When we started to leave, there was absolutely no noise around us, not even insects. When we pulled back the curtains, there was a fire in the fire pit despite us dousing it with water 3 times and making sure it was out. Before we left, we got out of the van to put it out and instantly felt like we were in danger. What was standing in the road that night? I had this really strange experience a couple of years ago when I was driving home from my boyfriend's house one night. He lived way out in the country at the time. The darkness was so intense that you could travel for miles without encountering any streetlights. In the middle of the road I saw in my headlights this dog standing with its back to me. Didn't really seem too unusual. I slowed down, and my next turn was coming up soon anyway, so I just eased on by it. This is when things got freaky. The dog stood still and didn't move its body but just turned its head to look at me, and I swear this dog had the face of a human. I mean, there was nothing remotely dog-like about that face. It looked right at me. It was like a man's face had been stretched over the front of its head, and it just stared at me as I drove past. My stomach sank, and I sped off. I didn't really know how to react. It just felt like I had seen something I really wasn't supposed to see. I could still see it in my rearview mirror until darkness took over. I was so freaked out that I missed my turn and had to backtrack. I called my boyfriend right after and told him what happened, and he was pretty freaked out too, but not really surprised. He tells me that all sorts of strange things happen in that swampy rural area, especially at night, and he has his own unsettling stories from growing up there. I've driven that road many times since and have never seen anything like it again, but I can't forget the look on its face. Has anyone else ever had any experience with some sort of human-faced dog? I have no idea what this was, but it felt really ominous, and I still feel a bit sick when I think about it. It was 2019, and I was on a road trip with my significant other at the time. We were visiting the Grand Canyon and decided to pull over on the way back to our motel in Williams, Arizona, so that he could practice his astrophotography out in the desert, where there was less light pollution. In hindsight, a very bad idea. We pull over on the little side road, more like where an old creek bed was, honestly, not even a side road, amongst some sagebrush, probably about 40-ish feet from Highway 64 and 20-ish miles from any town, and it's pitch black outside, probably about 10 or 11 p.m. The only light is from the car lights. I don't actually see anything, but I had a super eerie feeling like I was being watched. I even get the flashlight and shine it through the sagebrush, thinking I was going to see a cougar or a wild hog or something, some kind of animal. Never saw a damn thing. My instincts have never been wrong before, but I shake it off, thinking it's just the weirdness of being in the desert at night. So we're both in the front seats with the doors open, and he's adjusting the camera settings in the driver's seat when it happens. Something pushes the car. Like, from the back. The car kind of gently, but suddenly, shifts its weight to the front tires, like it does when you bounce around or lean against the bumper and it rolls up on the tires a little bit. That's what happened. Except neither of us is doing it, because we're both sitting in the car. The car is facing the desert, with the road behind it. Whatever this thing was, it was between us and the road. I freaked the hell out, obviously, and slam my door shut, and we get the hell out of there. We never saw a thing, never heard a weird noise, nothing. Just a little nudge on the back of the car. It still gives me chills when I think about it. Anyway, we booked it back to Williams and tried not to think about the rest of the night. We searched the bumper of the car in the morning and didn't see anything that looked like something touched it. It was a white car covered in red desert dust. You'd think something would have shown up. What the hell was out there with us, 20-ish miles from any towns? Sun Lake State Park, Washington, summer 2000. I was just visiting a friend of mine who lives in Stratford, Washington State, about 100 miles east of Seattle. On the second night of my visit, we drove into Seattle to check out the local nightlife. At about 2 a.m. we left and started driving home. As we neared his home, the area around Blue Lake, we stopped on Route 17 just south of Sun Lake State Park to relieve ourselves. The time was around 4:30 a.m. We pulled over to the side of the road and walked off into the bushes. Within moments, I heard off to my left a very loud noise as if something was coming towards us through the forest. I was rather nervous, so I hurried back to the car. As I reached it, my friend came running towards me. We sensed something following us at a distance, got in the car, shut and locked the doors, and waited quietly. Out of the forest came the strangest thing I've ever seen. It must have been a Bigfoot. I have spent some time living in Maine in the Northeast, so I have exposure to bears. I am most certain that this was not a bear. The creature seemed agitated. Perhaps when we walked off into the woods to relieve ourselves, we startled it? It approached the car and walked around it, looking at it and us. When it moved to the front of the car, we could see it was about 6.5 to 7 feet tall and covered in red/brown hair from head to toe. It stood upright, although with a hunch, and appeared to be bipedal. It approached the car and came around the front. We quickly flicked on the car headlights, and this is when we saw it best. We were so scared that we sounded the horn, hoping that our footsteps would scare it off. At this point, the creature made a kind of chortling sound, similar to that of the African dog, the Basenji. Just then he reared back and pounded the hood of my friend's car. Perhaps it was agitated by the sound of the horn. It took off into the woods, and we hit the road as fast as possible. We returned 3 times over the next few nights but never saw anything else. The area where we parked had no tracks, just crushed grass and underbrush where the creature walked, and we entered the woods. Sightings in South Texas? I was riding in the car with my mom, which had to be about 8 to 12 years ago. The area I grew up in is rural but has pastures and farmland dotted with patches of monte, or brushy forests with mostly mesquite trees. We were taking a back road, and I was looking around since it was an area we don't normally go through, and I noticed something brown up ahead at a T intersection. It was pretty big and dark enough that at the pace we were going, I couldn't quite make out any features other than the big brown eyes and head, which followed me while I watched it. I was in my late teens, and at that moment after passing by, I told my mom, trying to make sense of it, that I think I just saw a golden eagle. Now the issue with that is, this eagle didn't have a beak, this thing had a flat face, and the appendages coming from its torso seemed to grow out more like arms. If I had to put my blurry interpretation to an animal, I know it would be a sloth. But this thing was way too big. Furthermore, while golden eagles are occasionally found in the area, it is exceedingly rare, and there is 0 chance there's a sloth crawling around Edinburgh, Texas. It randomly pops into my head because something about this thing felt off. If it was a Bigfoot, it was quite young, as it was small in stature from what I could see, though it would have been hunched over. Admittedly, I'm somewhat perplexed about the nature of this creature. Like I said, I'm skeptical in general, and I think maybe I was mistaken. That said, I'm very interested in stories from the region. Local folklore has always been an interest for me, and I'm now wondering a few things. Has anyone else seen anything weird south of San Antonio? What legends do we have that override in the area? I am aware of the mangy coyotes that some people try to pass off as El Chupacabra. In fact, I saw one of those coyotes a few months ago right here in the middle of San Antonio. The poor creature was frightened by me and my dog. We tend to have a more spiritual folklore, to my knowledge, so I'm curious if anyone has something to share that maybe I'm unaware of. I don't know if I encountered a Wendigo, so I'd love to hear what you think. Before I tell the story, I wanted to give some background on the area and me. Feel free to skip. This took place in northern Alberta, Canada, and in Treaty 8 territory. I'm Woodland Cree and grew up in the area, so I heard many stories about the area. Especially the ones about the Wendigo, like how one was killed and they cut off the head and buried it near the Gruar area and the body near Whitefish. This is to prevent the body and head from reattaching and reviving the creature. Another story I heard is about how the entire area of Woodland is haunted by evil spirits, and I always felt creeped out when I visited that area. This all happened when I and my cousin were out quaiding, and this was around late September to early October. This means that the days got shorter, so it will almost be completely dark at 9. This was at Gruar, where the head was supposedly buried nearby. We started at, I believe, 6 p.m. This was the first time we hung out in person since the pandemic started. We stayed out till 9 or 10, so it was completely dark out, but we were going through the fields where we pretty much grew up playing in, going through the reserve, and seeing the house where we spent so many good memories. It was a refreshing time because COVID just brought my mood down a lot, so it was nice to have a break. There's this baseball field that we went through how many times without a problem. This time when we were about to go through the field again, it was completely dark. The only light we had was the headlights on the quad, but we were used to driving in the dark, so this didn't seem out of the ordinary to us. But this time it felt off, like I felt like something was watching us or stalking us, a gut feeling. I wasn't the only one who felt this. My cousin felt it and said, "Do you feel that feeling too?" And I said, "Yeah, I feel it," so we decided to turn around. On our way back my cousin turned his head and looked behind us, and he immediately looked forward and sped up. When we were pretty far away, he said, "The reason I sped up is because I thought I saw something moving back there." After that, we decided to call it a night and went back home. I honestly have no idea why we felt that, like it was out of nowhere. Like I said, supposedly the head was buried in that area. Maybe that had to do with it? I would love to hear what you guys think. Was it a Wendigo or something else? Thanks, guys. Something tried to get into our car. This happened to my best friend and me when we were 16. It was the weekend, and we live in rural Montana. We heard that the Milky Way would be brightly on display that night, so we hopped into my car and decided to go park on a back road with little light pollution with some snacks and enjoy the show. I had a 2001 Toyota Echo, and it was my pride and joy. I opened up the sunroof, and we found a nice little pullout on a gravel road that I had driven well over 100 times. We locked all the doors, put our seats back, and stared up at the beautiful starry sky as we chatted and ate our snacks. We were in a farm area. There was one little house about a mile behind us. The house was quiet, and the outside light was on, but it was nearly 1 in the morning. After a half hour we began to hear footsteps on the gravel road approaching us from the rear. It was dark, but the sky lit up the outside well enough for us to see our surroundings for a good distance. We could not see anything walking on the road. Growing up on these backroads, you learn over time what different animals and humans sound like walking through the woods or on the gravel. I'd been on these roads my whole life and could tell this was not an animal. It was far too noisy, and the heel would scuff the rocks as if it were a heavy pair of boots. We watched intently, but right when it sounded close, it stopped. Then we heard whistles. High-pitched eerie whistles. At first my friend said it sounded like a recall whistle. Like maybe someone nearby was calling their dog. But then they got short, and they were sporadic with no real pattern. I closed the sunroof, and we began packing up to go. I threw the blankets in the back seat, and we put away our snacks. The hairs on my neck suddenly stood up, and right when I was about to mention it, the handle of the rear door got yanked, hard. Like someone tried to open the door. It snapped like it was let go hurriedly. I looked out that window the moment it happened, and nothing was there. There was nowhere to hide, my mirrors were pointed in all the right places, so I had a good view no matter what angle I looked from, and we didn't hear anyone run away. Goosebumps formed all over our arms, and I threw it into drive and sped off. The next day I returned. I wanted to look for footsteps or some sort of explanation. There was none. It was quiet, and the only trails in the gravel were tire tracks from the night before. I don't know what it was, but to this day we get scared when we talk about it. In 2017, I and my two friends saw something unnatural and wrong in Klahanie, Washington. It was January. The thing about this part of Washington state is that the forests and the farmland blend into each other. You'll be driving through these narrow country roads that wind through the hills and continuously pop out of the woods and back in very unpredictably. I was driving with two friends at around 10:30 or 11 p.m. on one such road. My friend Tom, let's say, in the front is like me in that he is down with some of the zanier elements of ghosts, UFOs, etc. My friend Dan in the back is not like this, however, he is a very skeptical, rational, boot-cut jeans kind of guy. He is a mechanical engineer. Lives up to the stereotype. It is a very foggy night, and as we pass into an especially windy, hilly part of the road, it starts to get extremely cold in the car, enough to where we comment on it. At this time, the radio plays Angel Eyes by Ella Fitzgerald, a very dark, haunting ballad that notably features the lines Angel Eyes, that old devil sent, they glow unbearably bright, excuse me while I disappear. Tom and I start to joke that there is a very scary atmosphere and that we must be in the shadow realm, but genuinely by this point something felt wrong, and I was growing afraid. The radio begins to emit sudden static fuzz. We come around a corner to a straightaway about 50 yards or so, lined tightly with a tall wooden fence on both sides. I let the car coast to a stop, not sure why. The fog clears, and we see a pale, wispy, sort of unclearly shaped humanoid silhouette glide/walk/lurch its way across the road from left to right. It immediately gets ice-ducking cold in the car. It looked over its shoulder at us, Bigfoot style, I swear to God. It reaches the other side of the road in about 5 seconds, and we lose sight of it behind an outcropping in the fence. We immediately were all in shock, and Tom tells me to pull the car forward to the outcropping. I do, and there is nothing there. If it had hopped the fence, we would have seen it. It just disappeared. We all right away were in agreement that this was not a human or a deer or whatever, that it was something ducked up and not normal. Even Dan, who is a natural-born skeptic. We got going, and after we got out of this valley, the fog cleared and the temperature returned to normal. Several years later I was visiting Tom, and we texted Dan about it to see if they remembered it like we do. We still discuss it to this day. What did I see? I was driving to work this morning in heavy rain down a backcountry road, and it was still really dark out, Central Texas for reference. My lights in my car weren't working either. I saw this thing come out of the forest on one side of the road on 4 legs. It was light gray or else very dirty and white. It was 3.5 or 4 feet tall on 4 legs. I thought it was a dog or a very hairy wolf with the color and size of it. It had scraggly hair almost like an old English sheepdog's texture, and its limbs were very lanky and thin. It didn't really seem to have a defined face, just lots of hair. It moved in a manner that suggested it was injured, almost appearing to drag itself across the road. I almost hit the creature, so I swerved and barely missed it. By the time I rolled down my side window, it had already reached the other side of the street, stood up on 2 legs, and walked into the forest. It was very tall, I mean, at least 6.5 feet, most likely more than that though. I know I sound crazy, but I wish I had a dashcam to capture footage of it. I'm thinking about getting one now in case I ever see something like this again in the future. What could this thing be? Gary, Indiana. Before GPS maps were a common thing, late 90s, I was part of a caravan of cars. I was a writer for their company, that took a wrong turn out of Indianapolis and somehow ended up going to Chicago because the lead driver and his navigator were dyslexic and stubborn or something. Gary was the "we are not even in ducking America anymore" type of lost. Gary felt as if he were rolling through the set of a post-apocalyptic movie. We didn't see anyone but saw a lot of rotten ruin. As we were following a lead car, who had the triptych map, we couldn't risk breaking from the pack and had to follow them. My car kept shouting, "Where the heck are you going, guys? This is not safe." Thankfully, the lead car got back on the road, but in the wrong direction. We stopped at a large gas station just before we re-entered Indianapolis, where we started from, on our way to Frederick, Maryland, to give you an idea of how ducked up that place was. When we got out of the cars, the lead driver and his navigator companion, who had the maps, were in a heated fight. We swapped out the navigator of the lead car and ended up going the correct way back home. But we got so delayed, we were crawling at 10 to 15 miles per hour on the Ohio Turnpike at 2 a.m., where they were doing overnight construction with huge lights, because at some point we missed an exit on I-70. The navigator blamed herself for dozing off, and ended up too far north for a while. It was one of the most stressful road trips I had ever been on. I think our group swapped out drivers several times on what was supposed to be just one swap, and a 9-hour drive was almost 20 hours because we kept getting lost, and our U-Haul trailer had issues. This tiny company couldn't afford another hotel night for everybody, so we just kept driving. Friends were lost that day. We still don't speak of Gary, Indiana. Dog Man encounter. I was driving west on Morgan Run Road, near Lubbock Lane in Monongalia County, West Virginia. This is close to Cheat Lake. It happened on June 8 around 7:30 p.m. I was on my way back to my friend's house. After I drove past Lubbock Lane, I noticed a tall figure move out and then back into the trees. I wasn't driving fast, so I got a good look at it, though it's still hard for me to believe what I saw. It turned back and looked at me. I swear it was a wolf standing on 2 legs. The head was huge with long, dark hair. The body was almost like that of a powerful man, but it still had the characteristics of a wolf. I didn't get a good look at the legs, but they were definitely shaped like a wolf's. Very muscular arms with human-like hands and very long fingers or claws. When it looked at me, the eyes seemed to twinkle or shine as the head moved. The face was a wolf's face. Same snout and ears with a thick neck. I believe it had something in the right hand, but the body blocked it from my view. It just looked at me for a few seconds and then took a few steps into the brush. That was all I saw. I found some of the sightings reported to you on Google. I didn't notice any from West Virginia, but since this is near Pennsylvania, I thought you may be interested. I haven't talked to anyone about this. This beast looked evil, and I'm not really sure I should have reported this. But it would be interesting if others had reported seeing something like this in the same area. Disappearing man in the road. A strange incident occurred when I departed from work this morning at around 4 a.m. There's one stretch of road I take home that's usually especially devoid of people at that time of night. It's a 4-lane road with a turning lane down the middle. All that's on this road is a small airport on one side and essentially a swamp on the other. I turn onto this road, driving like normal, fully paying attention because sometimes deer like to jump out around there. It's completely empty, no other cars in sight, a totally straight road with no curves, and in the best way I can describe it, a man just materialized out of thin air walking in the center turning lane about 10 feet ahead of me. There's no way on earth I wouldn't have seen him sooner, what with my absurdly bright headlights and absolutely nothing else around. I didn't get a great look at him since he showed up so suddenly, and by the time I even registered it in my brain, I was already flying past him. All I could tell was it looked like a middle-aged/older black man with a red jacket on, and he had maybe one of those wheeled suitcases or bags he was kind of dragging behind him. I hit the brakes and was looking for him in my mirrors because he was very close to my car, and I was scared I'd hit the guy or something. Did not see anything or anyone at all behind me. As fast as he appeared, he was gone. I ended up pulling a U-turn because I wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Keep in mind there's absolutely nowhere for this guy to have gone in the 30 seconds it took for me to slow down and turn around. On one side of the road there's a fence around the airport runways, and on the other is an empty gravel lot and a ditch. There was no man anywhere. Anyway, either I lost my mind as I first thought, or there are ghost hitchhikers. Saved by something? This encounter, which occurred a long time ago, brought back memories, and I believe it deserves its place here.
I, a 36-year-old male, had been in the trucking industry since 2015.
This experience took place shortly after I had started, about November of 2015. I was driving down a 2-lane highway at night, just cruising along, about 77,000 pounds overall, just relaxed. I started to approach this blind curve in the road that dipped down and swept to the left. As I approached the curve, an instinct told me to prepare to stop. Knowing I weighed 77,000 pounds, I wasn't stopping easily, but I was going to try. As I cleared the rest of the curve, coming back into the straight part, something, to this day, I have no clue what, came out of the trees in the form of a white orb. This orb then took humanoid form and grabbed onto my front grille, as if it was actually pushing my truck the opposite direction or just bracing to stop me. I stopped a lot faster than I should have been able to, but with no signs of any tires locking up or anything, not so much as a tire squeal. When I came to that complete stop, the humanoid wiped its brow, as if it did a really hard job, and vanished. There, in my headlights, was this massive buck, easily 18 points, standing in the middle of my lane. Had I hit him doing the speed I was, his head would have whipped up into my windshield, and his antlers would have pierced through, possibly killing me. That's how big this thing was. All he did was walk up to my front grille, snort at it, and casually walk off the highway. I then headed on to my shipper and parked there overnight, not thinking too much about the encounter. The next morning, as I was doing my pre-trip inspection, I noticed something about my front grille. At the time, I drove a Freightliner Cascadia, complete with a chrome grille. In the chrome, right on the top of the hood, were 2 burn marks from hands. Only, these hands had 3 long main fingers, with a thumb. I'm not sure if it was an alien, a ghost, an angel, or what, but it saved my life that night, of that I have zero doubt. Haunted locations. Has anyone heard of Crooked Road? So to preface this, I grew up in Wisconsin most of my life. I moved back and forth a lot, but altogether I've lived there close to 9 of the 21 years I've been alive. I was born in Eau Claire. The area I grew up in is called Spooner, Wisconsin, a tiny little nowhere town. I say all this to ask this question: has anyone from other towns heard of the story of Crooked Road? I remember the story being talked about a lot growing up, and pretty much anyone from town I had asked about it knew the whole thing. Anyways, it goes like this. A couple rented a limo for the high school prom. Afterward, they were on their way home and had to apparently take a crooked road to get where they were going, and it's said that they crashed and died in a horrible accident. So the rest goes like this. It's said that if you go to Crooked Road at midnight and turn your car off and wait, the girl will show up in your back seat but can only be seen through the rear view mirror. If you turn around, she won't be there. If you look back in the rear view, she'll be there staring at you in a bloody prom dress. Then the car's ignition will fire up on its own without the key turning. Then the same thing happens with the man. He will appear in the side view mirror, also wearing a bloody and tattered tuxedo, and he will begin slowly approaching from the distance. The car turns off, and then people tend to panic at that moment and attempt to start their car, and it won't start the first few turns. Then once he's within an arm's reach of the car, it starts, and the said person who attempted to see if it was true speeds off in fear. So yeah, that's the story. I'm curious who grew up in Spooner and if you remember this story being told to you, but I'm mainly curious if anyone from any other towns in Wisconsin or possibly anywhere else has heard this story. If I've missed up any details, please correct me as well. It's been 6 years since I last lived there and 4 since I last visited, so I may have forgotten a few details. I can't wait to hear everyone's responses. Be the way. We were on a road trip to visit family in another state and decided to take the long way to avoid turnpike fares and so we would have more opportunities to stop to feed our young baby. Additionally, when you get off the turnpikes and take the back roads, you often see beautiful scenery and discover charming little towns along the way, right? Along the way, we needed to stop to feed the baby, and we saw a campground sign, so we thought that would be kind of a neat place to stop, since the sign said it had cabins, a lake, a playground, etc. We had our other young children with us, so this was a good place to take a break, have lunch, stretch our legs, and let the kids get out and run off some energy. We figured we might have to pay a small entrance fee to get in, but to our surprise, the campground owners allowed us to use the facilities and playground at no charge, and we thought ourselves fortunate to have come across such nice people, such a happy accident. You're right to hear ominous music in your head at this point. We parked by the playground, took out our food, set ourselves up at a picnic table, had our lunch, and fed the baby, and after we ate, the 2 older kids played on the playground equipment with the campground owners' grandkids. The campground owners, a husband and wife, both older, maybe in their 70s, stayed around and chatted with us, which we felt was nice, because they were telling us about the area and the campground, and they seemed like very nice people. I watched the kids playing and just kind of half listened to their conversation, which went something like this. My kids, we're on a trip. They're grandkids, you're not leaving from here. My kids, puzzled looks, yes, we are. We are only going to play for a little while before we leave. My mom said so. They're grandkids, no. My grandma said you're staying. Like the last people who came here. Now I'm curious, I'm sure they're just talking about people that come to camp here. My kids, no, we have to go. We're going to a hotel tonight with a pool, it has a slide. They're grandkids, no, you're not. People always stay. We make them. What? At this point, the owner's grandkids' voices are loud and insistent, and I'm getting concerned because this is just getting weird. I tell my kids to come to the table to get cleaned up so we can leave, because something just feels off, which they seem really happy to do, because they're getting freaked out, too. The campground owners seem to notice their grandkids have said something that triggered us and suddenly shift the conversation and start talking about how they have a church at the campground, and everyone enjoys their services so much, and we should stay. Why? There's a service that night, as a matter of fact, and they'd love to have us stay for it. They'd put us up in one of their cabins, give us dinner, and provide bedding, etc. We said we appreciated the offer, but no thanks, we had to be going. They started insisting we stay, like, really strongly insisting, almost beyond the point of politeness, almost to the point of bullying. Just very pushy, saying how it would be a shame if we drove when we were tired and got into an accident and something happened to the children, how we should really think of the children and their future and not put them in danger like that. I've never had anyone say anything like that to me before, or since. I can't tell you how fast we packed up our things and left. To this day, I can't tell you exactly where it was, other than it was somewhere in West Virginia. I don't remember what area or town it was near. I've never tried to avoid the turnpike again, I'll gladly pay the turnpike fares anytime now. Perhaps I was simply overthinking the situation, and they were genuinely concerned. However, when I reflect on it now, I still believe they were quite strange individuals, and I'm thankful we left when we did. Possible skinwalker or black dog encounter? This happened a couple hours prior to when I'm writing this. A buddy of mine met me for McDonald's for dinner tonight. Normally we'd hit Waffle House, but it was already packed. We started talking about dumb stuff we did as kids, and it eventually became creepy stuff we saw as kids. I brought up how back when I was in the Boy Scouts, during one of our campouts, a troop camped a little further away from mine had an expensive, allegedly wildlife-proof cooler full of raw meat raided by a pack of coyotes. For laughs, my buddy said, like a skinwalker? I responded, maybe, but I certainly wouldn't venture out of my tent in the middle of the night to conduct an investigation. Rather quickly, I changed the subject. When I was driving home, I slowed down slightly to go through a school zone. In Henry County, Georgia, where I reside, speed cameras are constantly in operation. I slow my truck to 30 miles an hour. I hear a voice over the rumble of my V8 engine whisper, "Speed up. They'll catch you. They'll catch you." Writing it off as radio static or the product of a tired mind, I sped up slightly and kept going down the back road until I hit a four-way stop. And then I saw it. A massive dog like a dark cloud with glowing greenish-blue eyes. They looked like a cat's eyes when a flashlight is shown on them. The dog was huge, its shoulders could easily have matched the height of my truck bed, and it was barreling towards me, dangerously close to grabbing my rear end like Smokey Bear. The air inside my cab went cold, despite the closed windows and running heater, as I noticed water vapor exit my mouth. Needless to say, I gunned it and nearly flipped my truck, driving 95 miles an hour the whole way home. Was this a skinwalker? Did I encounter a black dog? Ghost on Elbow Road. I know this is going to seem like a whole lot of baloney, but about a year ago I was out with my friend going to see my other friend's small band playing, and on the way back we had a crazy experience. Just for some extra details, we're both young adults, 18 and 19, both women. I was driving, I've never had any spiritual experience, and I did minimal research on this topic, did not find anything. After the band concert, it was just starting to get dark, but when we got onto the Long Elbow Road, it was pitch black. I'm not too good at directions, so bear with me. My friend was very immersed in telling a story about her boyfriend while I passed this very tiny like bridge thing, and that's where we saw her. It was an old lady, carrying a bucket, with hair in front of her face, yes, like the ring lady, and just walking on the side of the road. If you are familiar with this area, you will know that there is very little space for walking and that the only nearby structures are residential properties. This is definitely not a place for an old lady to be. Personally, I was freaked out. I immediately asked my friend if she had seen what I had seen. She was confused, but when I explained, she said, "Oh yeah, I'm sure she just got in an accident and is walking somewhere." Then she continued on with her passionate story. I cut her off and told her that there were no cars we had passed and explained that the bucket does not make sense. Once again, she brushed it off to finish her story. By this point, we are miles ahead of where we saw her, and we pass a motorcycle on a driveway, where my friend claims that was probably hers. I say that would make zero sense that an old lady left her perfectly fine motorcycle on a driveway, and also an old lady riding does not make sense. When we realized we were on Elbow Road, we hadn't traveled that direction often to go to Chesapeake, so we really didn't know. We found out the haunted stories. We've been on that road multiple times for other occasions, and we were even on it at 3 a.m. one night, but we've never seen anything again. Does anyone know any history of an old lady who may have passed that would hold a bucket? Also, feel free to share any similar stories. Many years ago, around 20 or so, we were on our way to pick up my dad from work. It was late at night, around 11:30 p.m., but there were enough cars on the streets to not feel alone out there. We were turning into a very large avenue. Due to the hour, it was not very trafficy. You could easily see both your sides if someone was approaching your car. While turning left into this big avenue, no trees around, just cars and some signals, we hear a loud noise like someone falling on the roof of the car. We were so freaked out because we clearly heard how this someone, or something, crawled from left to right on top of our car. I was in the co-pilot's seat and heard the noise like this thing hit on the door behind me, like knocking real hard, and tried to open it. But there's nothing there. I was terrified, screaming, trying to visualize anything, an owl, a cat, or a hand of someone pulling the door, but there was nothing. So my mom, who was the driver, couldn't stop because we were on a high-speed road. She just kept driving. We were expecting at some point to hear something fall from the roof, because we were sure it was still up there, although the noise stopped at that moment, but nothing happened. When we met my dad, he was already out waiting for us and asked him before even saying hello if there was something on the roof, scratches, or footprints, but there was nothing there. He was so surprised to see us so scared and agitated that he had to drive a longer path back home because we didn't want to take that same route. Black trench coat, bowler hat, and red eyes on Route 66 in NM. Hi guys, so before I share this, I will say that I was very young, but my mother recalls the experience quite clearly. I'm not really into cryptozoology at all, but I'm curious if this is a common sighting or what exactly my mother, father, and I experienced. This was along Route 66 going from Texas into New Mexico. We were heading to my great-grandfather's funeral back in 2005 in the middle of the summer, and I was 10 at the time. The sun was starting to set, and I remember us talking. I was eating a Happy Meal they bought me at the time, and we were just swapping stories and having a good time. They made me this little cubby-like area in the trunk for me to lie down in, color, etc. However, I spent the majority of the trip gazing out the window, observing the passing scenery. While my parents were talking and the radio was on, I was just watching the world pass by, but I remember very clearly seeing a man standing and staring at cars. He wore a black trench coat, a bowler or perhaps a top hat, and a black beard, but the part I remember the most vividly was bright, glowing red eyes. I pointed it out to my mom, who was distracted at the time, having not seen it. Well, a couple hours go by and I'm still looking out my window. I made a little game for myself to see if I could count how many birds I could spot along the way, and the sun was starting to set. Next thing I know, I see the same dude just ahead of us, but because of the dark, the eyes were a lot more intense. My mom got a little concerned about it and told my dad to speed up. Eventually fatigue set in, and we found a rest stop. It was pitch black there, it was the kind of dark you can't even see your own feet in without a light, and we were all trying to sleep. I had to go to the bathroom, and my dad walked out with me, as I was rather freaked out from the sighting earlier, worried the guy would come grab me. As we got out of the car, I remember my father staring off into the distance and telling me to hurry up, though keeping his usual calm demeanor. When I finished and got back into the car, he started it, and we took off again, driving to stay in a motel instead. I asked him and my mother about it recently as we were reminiscing together about trips we've taken. When I asked my dad why he had us go to a motel, he claimed it was because he saw the same pair of eyes staring at us from a hill near where we were, above a rocky outcrop. Does anyone have any ideas or stories as to what exactly this could have been? I remember the eyes so vividly, they're burned into my mind, as well as him being out in the desert heat with a heavy trench coat, and I'm not sure. My dad swears it was the devil. My mom believes it was some form of chupacabra. I personally am not sure. Any thoughts would be appreciated. As I said, the event was over 19 years ago, and I haven't seen anything since, as I live far away from Route 66 now. Alien cops stop the car. between Ilistaro and Lapua, Western Finland, October 2, 1980. The time was 11:23 at night, and a 23-year-old man was driving from Vasa toward Lapua on Road 64 to have a late meal with friends at a well-known local grill bar. When he was at the outskirts of Lapua near a small hill, he saw a bright light coming from the sky. It came closer to his position, and suddenly the surroundings were lit up, and a glowing, disc-shaped, solid object descended 10 meters, 33 feet, in front of his car. The witness could not remember if he himself stopped the car or if somehow the object did it. The contours of the object were quite clear. It was a craft of some sort, and it somehow glowed and appeared to be very hot. The craft was 6 meters, 19.7 feet, wide, with 2 white lights on the hull's ends, but no other details were visible. The craft hovered about half a meter, 1.6 feet, above the road surface when suddenly 2 lights became visible in the middle of the object and 3 beings stepped out. The witness described them as quite human-like, but a little smaller and shorter. He did not see any ears or hair, but the eyes were tiny. The humanoids walked towards him and came up to the left side door of the car, and that was all the witness could recall of the event. The next thing he remembered was that he was driving his car into the parking lot of the grill bar, but it was already closed. 4 hours had passed and it was now in the middle of the night. The grill bar was close, so it shouldn't have taken 4 hours to get there. What happened during the missing time the witness had no memory of. An encounter with a humanoid outside of 29 Palms. My dad has some stories from his experiences living in California, so I recorded one of them over break and thought I would share. I and this guy, a friend of mine, were out drinking beer one night, driving around, and running amok out in the middle of the desert, out by 29 Palms. We were miles from anywhere or anything, literally just bonsaiing out on these old roads way out in the middle of flipping nowhere. I mean, we are 20 to 25 miles from the nearest telephone pole. We came across this Datsun B210, that was like brand new back in the 70s, and it was burned from the firewall back. But the front of the car, the paint was still on it and everything. So we all are like, oh man, check out this car. We pull up, and we get our lights on it, and it's super dark, no moon, in the middle of the desert, and it is just completely black out there, except for his headlights and the KC lights on his truck. It had a good engine in it. We had a whole truck full of tools and a whole bunch of beer, so hell. We just started tearing at it. I go, Duck, check it out, man, I can use this engine in my truck. The idea is perfect. So we started taking the engine apart and removing it. We're drinking beer, we got the speakers up on the hood of the car, and we're in there twisting wrenches and just having a time. He didn't have an auto reverse cassette deck, so we had to go back and reverse/change the tape every time it ended. You had to physically go over there, remove the tape, turn it around, and put it back in. There were no radio stations, so that's all we were listening to. We're almost getting ready to get the engine out and the tape ends again. But we're in the middle of doing something, and we couldn't jump up to go change it. Thus, we find ourselves tightening the wrenches amidst the eerie silence of the night. And then we could hear something running around. You know where the light from the headlights and KC light stops being light and it turns to darkness? That's where we heard it. We heard it running around. You'd hear it from over here and /running/ to over there. A little pitter-patter running through the sand, across the desert, and through brushes and stuff like that. We were like, what the hell? He stopped to tell us that he had the chills and goosebumps there in the room. He said he could remember it like it was yesterday. We look at each other and are like, whisper, what the FCK was that? We stopped and were completely silent. You could almost hear your heartbeat. And you'd hear it again over there, so we'd turn our heads and look over there, using gestures to point, and we'd look over here on this side. And we looked at each other like, WTF face and mutterings under the breath. We take our flashlights and look over there. Can't see anything. We'd get back to work, then hear it again, and we were like, duck it, we're out of here. The noise is freaking us out. So we took off, came back the next day, during the day, and finished pulling the engine out. We went outside to explore the area. I was in the brush where we heard the tracks, and there were tiny footprints. Like, little kid, barefoot kid footprints. The footprints were barefoot in the sand, and they were scattered around the perimeter of our location. It wasn't us. We had boots on, and we are big, size 11/12 guys. And we're miles and miles from anything. But there was nothing out there, no houses, nothing. Little footprints could be seen scuttling through the darkness. But there's a lot of activity out there, probably 200 miles from Area 51 and another 80 miles from Death Valley. There's tons and tons and tons of just barren, desert wasteland nothing. But there was something out there that wouldn't come into the light that night. Weird encounter today while driving. Around 5 p.m. this evening, my son and I were on our way to the local fishing pier up the road from my house. We were driving on Strouber Memorial/Anclote Boulevard in the Anclote area of Holiday, Florida. For reference, I won't type out the whole history of this road, but you can look it up under most haunted places in Florida. This is a narrow 2-lane road that runs along the coast and a large electric plant. The car in front of us suddenly slowed to a complete stop, and because there was oncoming traffic, I couldn't go around him, so I too stopped. The man, who was alone, jumped out of his car in a complete panic and started screaming, "Are you okay?" He immediately got down on all fours and started shining his flashlight under his car and looking all around the immediate area frantically. He was in obvious shock, he looked disoriented and was shaking. My first thought was maybe this guy is on drugs, it is a holiday after all, but he was a well-dressed and healthy-looking guy in a nice car and didn't look at all like a typical druggie. He walked around his car about 4 times, maybe, and then he looked at me and my son and said through the window, "Where did he go?" My son and I were looking for some kind of animal, assuming maybe he thought he hit a squirrel that we didn't see or something. My son stated that we didn't see anything and that we don't think he hit anything. My son asked what he hit, and the man looked at us with the craziest look and said, "That kid on the bike." We were like, "No, man, there was nobody on a bike." He was white as a ghost at this point and just kind of turned around and walked back to his car confused. As I was driving away, I got goosebumps, realizing that he probably just had encountered one of the road's infamous spirits that is supposed to haunt that stretch of road. Either that or he was high on meth. Very interesting experience in Sussex County, Delaware. If this story isn't true, may God strike me dead now. In Sussex County, Delaware, there is a road with 13 curves. This is near the Broadkill River and Slaughter Beach. Yeah, I know, great names, right? They were named that for a reason. Rumor has it the road has 13 curves because it goes around Indian burial grounds and is said to be haunted. These are 90-degree curves. People around here tend to stay off it after dark. I believe it was either the Nanacoke Indian or Sequoia Indian tribes that inhabited that area. They were both here at one point, but the Nanticokes are still here. Anyway, on the way home from Philly on the 13th of September 2017, my daughter and her friend wanted to go down the road on the way home. They thought it would be fun to have 13 curves on the 13th. Of course I said okay. It was around 7:38 p.m. when we arrived. That's when it all started. I've been down that road before, so I know how to get to it. It took me 5 to 10 minutes to find it. I thought that was odd. When we found it, it got ice cold to the point I had to put the heat on. Okay, no big deal. Coming up to the first curve, I look in the mirror and think, where did that car come from? There has not been a driveway or street for about 3/4 mile or so, but he's driving extremely fast. Looking back at the road and back at the mirror, the distance was cut in half between us. Sort of like the Ninja Cat video. You know, the one where the person is recording his cat, hides behind the wall, looks back, and the cat is closer. Same thing. This person is going to crash, I said to my daughter. Again, I looked back at the road, back in my mirror, and the headlights were at my bumper. How fast does this guy want me to go? Again looked at the road back in the mirror. Wait, where did he go? If he turned off, surely we would have seen headlights somewhere. It was pitch black. There are no streetlights anywhere on this road. On the right, there are cornfields, on the left, there are trees and a salt marsh. Crap, he crashed. Turned around with nothing to show where he went. Okay, it's time to go. Just then 3 mists traveled in opposite directions in front of the car. 2 right to left, 1 the opposite. Okay, it's time to get out of here now. But I couldn't see out the windshield. It wouldn't clear with the wipers and fluid. The more I used the wipers, the worse it got. Okay, now we're all freaking out. We finally got out of that, and it took us 15 minutes to get out of the area. No matter which way we went, we ended up back at 13 curves. Now mind you, I don't ever get lost. So my daughter pulls out her GPS to get out. The GPS kept taking us back to 13 curves. Okay, now it's getting a little too freaky. I finally found an area I knew and started driving back to the highway, or so I thought. Guess where we ended back up at? Yup, 13 curves. Once again back to the GPS, we get on the road out to the highway, and it says we're going back to 13 curves. Something said, just keep going straight. Yay, the highway. The GPS is accurate now. It shows where we are and how to get home. Now it's hot, and the heat gets turned off, and windows go back down. A nice 65-70 degrees. Back on the highway, my daughter's friend asks her, "Did you see those people?" And my daughter finished with, standing on the rock watching us go by? Yes. They both freaked out. I didn't see anyone. That was my second and last trip down that road. The whole ordeal took about 30 minutes for something that should have taken 5. Now I know and understand why people stay off it at night. Took the backroads home through Washington last night, had 4 creepy moments, but the last one legit scared the hell out of me. So last night I was driving home from Bellingham, Washington, and decided to take the back roads instead of the freeway. In retrospect, it was a poor decision. I was tired, and the thought of dealing with high-speed highway traffic at night didn't sound fun, so I figured the scenic route would be more chill. It was not chill. For the most part, the drive was uneventful, but there were 4 moments that genuinely freaked me out. Sharing them here because I need to process, and maybe someone else has had something similar happen. 1. Weird light behind me. At one point I saw a strange light in my rearview mirror, trailing behind me. Thought maybe it was a car, but it turned off before I could tell what it was. Probably just headlights. Probably. 2. Shadow figure? Came around a bend and saw a moving shadow on the wall/trees. For half a second it looked like a shadowy thing was running alongside me around the turn. Again, probably just a shadow. But my brain went full nope. 3. Random guy with a wagon. Saw a homeless looking man just walking down the side of the road around twilight, dragging a little wagon behind him. Not scary by itself, but given we were in the middle of nowhere, it definitely gave me that wrong place, wrong time vibe. 4. And then this one. This was easily the worst moment. It's pitch black out, I'm still like an hour from home, driving through foresty nothingness, messing with my music for half a second, and suddenly I catch a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. Close headlights. I get that panicky someone's way too close feeling. Out here, that's super rare. It's not like the freeway where people tailgate all the time. I was going around 40 miles per hour at the time, so I sped up to 60, thinking they'd either pass or back off. They didn't. They just kept following. I sped up again, 75, maybe even 80. They stayed right there behind me. We're coming up on a turn, and I realize I can't safely take it at this speed, so I brake. Hard. The car behind me almost slams into me. Then, like they thought I was brake checking them, they suddenly started gunning it behind me even harder. I seriously thought this was it, either this person's trying to run me off the road, or I'm going to crash trying to lose them. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was probably 2 minutes, they flip on their blinker and just turn right. Gone. Poof. I didn't know who they were, why they were racing me through Washington's woods, or what they wanted. 100% do not recommend. Back roads in Washington are haunted or cursed or something. Anyway. Thanks for listening. A witness reported seeing a mantis-like entity through a window. Southern Finland, November 2016 and September 2017. This report came from a witness who had 2 strange sightings within a year. This happened while he was driving around on smaller, lonely country roads in southern Finland. Case 1. It was an evening in November 2016, and the man was on his way to Montala. On the way there, he drove on the country road through the quiet community of Okolanti. Shortly after he had passed the village, he suddenly saw in the glow of the car's headlights a strange creature crossing the road in front of him. It was gray and had a long, narrow head, large eyes, and long, slender legs. It ran very quickly across the road on 4 legs. The man was sure it was not an animal, and it was like no creature he had seen before. Later he found a picture of a cryptid online that he thought was similar. When he mentioned this to his friends, it was one of them who had also seen a similar looking creature once, when he was out driving. Case 2. The man was out driving again. It was dawn one morning in September 2017, and he was driving on the old country road from Jokela to Nurmijärvi. On this stretch there was an old, abandoned house that stood right next to the road. The man frequently drove this road and almost always slowed down slightly to gaze at the derelict house, often wondering about the identity of its former inhabitants. This morning, the window of the abandoned, old house reflected the sun's rays. And that's when he saw something that really scared him. Downstairs, he saw a pale gray, human-sized creature with a triangular head and enormous eyes peering out of one of the windows. As he looked at the creature, he felt its gaze bore into his mind. The man found it difficult to articulate the experience. He sped away from the scene. The man did not dare to drive on this road for a long time afterwards. But after a while he had the courage to pass the old house again, and he never saw the creature after this. UFO investigators reported UFO phenomena in the Nurmijärvi area during the same period. These are two cases that make you wonder a little. What did the man actually see? Could it be that he saw only animals, but due to the poor light and his vivid imagination, they appeared as horrifying creatures instead? Did someone make a prank and put a doll in the window? We don't know, and according to the man, he was sure that these were not ordinary animals or dolls that he saw. Never stop to help, because you never know. This story took place in Texas back in the fall of 1994. I was traveling from a small town outside Dallas called Grapevine and was heading to my duty station in Lubbock, Texas. I would never take this route again after what happened this night along I-20. I was traveling alone and had left around 7 p.m. on my road trip across Texas. If you've ever been to Texas, you know that you can drive for hours on end and still be there. Anyways, this story takes place about 30 minutes outside Abilene and would change my life forever. I made the decision to pause at a rest stop on the highway to take a break and relieve myself. I noticed a woman in a late 70s model Ford parked in the lot when I got out. I went and did my business and had a smoke, and before I left, I noticed the woman still sitting in her car. So I walked over and knocked on the window, which startled her, and asked if she was okay or needed help. She smiled and said that her tire was flat and that her battery had died while she was waiting here. I asked if she had a spare tire, and she said no. I asked if anyone was coming to get her. She said that her daughter was supposed to, but it's been several hours of her waiting. I asked where she was going, and she said Abilene. So I offered to give her a ride if she wanted. She started crying and said that would be wonderful. So we start heading to Abilene and making small talk. I told her I was in the Air Force and heading to Lubbock. She said that was wonderful and hoped that I really enjoyed it. I did notice that she kept looking in the mirror, so I asked if she was okay with me giving her a ride. She smiled and said that everything was fine, she was just happy that someone stopped. We eventually arrived at her home in a small suburb just outside of town. She thanks me for her ride and hands me a scrap of paper with her home number on it. She asked that I call her when I get to my destination so she can know I made it safely. I thanked her and said I would, but I'd wait until the morning since I knew it would be late when I arrived in Lubbock. I arrived at Reese AFB late that night and stayed at the on-base hotel. I got checked in and took a shower and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up, got dressed for the day, and went to find my unit headquarters. I didn't even think about the night before. I had so much to do that I checked squared away. It wouldn't be for another 2 weeks before I came across that scrap of paper with the number. I felt bad that I hadn't kept my promise to call, so I decided to stop what I was doing and give her a call. I called the number, and a young woman answered the phone, so I asked for Sandy. The woman on the line said, "Who?" So I apologized and said maybe it was Sandra. She asked, "Who is this?" And I gave her my name and explained that I had given her a ride a couple weeks back. She said that I must be confused, and I read the number off of the paper in my hand just in case I dialed the wrong number. She said, "No, I had the correct number, but I couldn't give her mother a ride home because she had passed away in the early 80s. She was apparently driving home and began having car troubles, so she stopped at a rest stop just outside of town. When she didn't make it home, her father, the woman I was talking with, became concerned. It was at that time there was a knock on their door, and 2 state troopers and a local police officer were at the door. She explained that a trooper noticed the vehicle parked at the rest stop and decided to investigate. What he found and what she told me gave me chills. Her mother had been hurt. Someone has slit her tires and disconnected her battery. The worst part was that there were bloody handprints on the window, steering wheel, and shifter. She appeared to be in the process of fleeing. The trooper said that they didn't have any suspects, but there were times that certain motorcycle clubs would pass through at night. I described the car, her mother's appearance, and what she was wearing to the best of my recollection. She definitely didn't look old enough to have a daughter my age. Her daughter just started crying and asked that I not call back. A few days later I received word to report to the squadron commander, so I headed over to our building. When I arrived, my captain called me into his office and began asking me questions about where I lived, when I drove in, and what route I took. I immediately knew something was wrong. We then went into a briefing room where my CO, a Texas Ranger, and a state trooper were seated. I introduced myself and took a seat. They began by asking the same questions my captain had previously asked, like why I had called the number and spoken with the woman. I explained everything as clearly and in detail as possible. They then finished taking notes, and the ranger asked, "Who needs a smoke?" So my CO excused himself, and the captain, the 2 officers, and I stepped out back to the smoking area. This was when the ranger informed me that he was the trooper who had found the car back in the early 80s and that the only reason he came out today was because of the details I mentioned in my phone call to the daughter. The trooper said that they get calls about a stranded woman every so often, but when they get there, they never find anything. So in closing, be careful who you decide to help because not everyone is what they seem. A dog that's not quite right. So my sister was driving me to my place. We both live in small towns surrounded by rural areas. We make this trip about once a month to see one another. We were just casually talking when there was a very sudden eerie shift in the air. Neither of us mentioned it out loud, but she later told me that she felt the same way. We have to slow down to cross a small bridge, the only way from one side of this tiny town to the other. And to our right we spot a dog that's not quite right. It's skinny, not like it's underfed, but like its limbs are a little too long. It did not pant, it did not run, and it did not react to our car at all. It just stood, head lowered slightly as it watched us pass. It moved slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. In that moment, it felt as though it had been waiting, knowing that anyone in town had to funnel past this point. It did not growl, lunge, or chase. However, even in the safety of a car, we both silently held our breath and shared a feeling of real and sudden danger without saying a word. As we passed, its head swiveled slowly, intentionally, to follow us. It did not blink, and I could see its eyes were not quite dog, not quite human. Its center was completely black, yet the whites were strikingly visible. As we passed, I watched it in the rearview mirror. With its shoulders hunched and head lowered further, the creature stalked behind us with slow, measured steps, now just below its shoulders. If I had to compare it to a dog breed, it would be an Ibizan hound or a greyhound, with that big barrel chest they have. It had a completely black coat and the snout of a Doberman. It had no discernible markings and the weirdest, longest limbs I've ever seen on any animal. I love dogs, that thing was not a damn dog. The highway apparition. There is a strip of highway near my hometown where too many accidents have happened. It isn't curvy, and it isn't bumpy. It's a straight strip of highway that for some reason or another has seen multiple crashes. I first became aware of these accidents when I started dating my then boyfriend. The strip of highway was between both of our places, and I never drove it until we met. One night, I was headed to his place when I saw it. I'm calling it an apparition, although I have no idea what it was. It was a white transparent essence that appeared to dive in front of my car. I know it could have been a mist, but it was fast and looked like a ghost. It startled me, and I swerved the car, nearly crashing into the guardrail. I corrected last minute and straightened out, feeling grateful to be okay and making note of where it happened so I could tell my boyfriend about it. The next time I was driving with him, I showed him the spot. He looked shocked and told me that 2 kids from his school had gone over that guardrail. One did not survive. At that time, I was unaware of this incident. I had heard him mention the accident before, but I didn't go to his school, so I didn't know any of the details of where it had happened. To add to that creepiness, he also told me that his aunt had crashed her motorcycle on this spot on the highway. It was an aneurysm, so it can't necessarily be chalked up to something paranormal, but it added to the eeriness. After that day, I always made a note of that guardrail when I passed it. Within a 3-month period, I noticed the guardrail had been crashed into at least 3 more times. I saw a new crumpled spot. Then the rail was replaced. Then 2 more crumpled spots occurred the next week. Overall, I don't know what's going on. Is it unusual for a guardrail to be hit often on a straight strip of road? Or am I just noticing it because I almost hit that guardrail? Also, can mist travel quickly as if diving in front of the car, or was it something else? There might be a scientific explanation out there, but the whole thing creeps me out. There was a hitchhiker who was out of this world. Between Puolanka and Oulu, northern Finland, August 1962. Many people around the world have reported strange and otherworldly people along the roads. Some of them have even been stopping cars and asking for a ride. This is such a report from Finland, and it happened to 2 young men in the early 60s. Ilmari Karunto was a man from Helsinki who was having a road trip vacation in northern Finland together with a friend. It was a warm, sunny day in August, and after a stop to swim in a lake, the 2 friends decided to drive from Puolanka to Oulu. When they had been driving some 50 kilometers, 31 miles, from Puolanka, Karunto, who sat beside the driver, noticed a short man at the side of the road. He had dark, loose-fitting clothes, and on his head he had something that looked like a dark brown beret, and on his feet were white boots. With his hands up, he signaled the men to stop and asked for a ride to a forest trail 5 kilometers, 3 miles, away. Karunto moved to the back seat, and they began to drive. In the back seat, Karunto started to wonder about the appearance of the strange man they'd picked up. His head was larger than usual, his mouth broad and thin, and his nose quite big. His skin had a slightly grayish tone, and the eyes were black and round. And when he happened to watch the man's eyes from the side mirror of the car, he saw to his astonishment that the man's eyelids closed from down to up. The man seemed to notice Ilmari's observation and put sunglasses on, and Carunto now saw that he had 6 thin, gray-brown fingers. Carunto's friend did not seem to notice anything unusual about the stranger, but Carunto was now a little upset and asked where in Finland the man was living. This question seemed to make him thoughtful, but then Carunto heard, like in his brain, that the stranger was not from Finland but had traveled around the world. Almost at once after this the trail came into sight, and the man stepped out, thanked once again politely, and began to walk along the forest trail. Carunto suggested to his friend that they should follow the mysterious man for a short moment. When the man had walked some 50 meters, 55 yards, he came to a pile of brushwood some 3 meters, 10 feet, high, and jumped on top of it and walked over it. "Look, he can levitate," said Carunto in awe to his friend, but they spoke nothing more of the observation during the following car trip. Despite their intense distress over the recent events, both men made the decision to carry on with their journey. After a while they heard a humming noise, which became louder. Suddenly the car's engine started to cough, then stopped altogether. When they stepped outside, they saw a large round disc-shaped object, perhaps 6 meters, 20 feet, in diameter, fly low over their car at 5 to 6 meters, 17 to 20 feet, make a wide turn, and then disappear. When they had recovered from the shock of this sighting, they tried to turn on the ignition of their car again, and it started without problem. They continued their road trip, and the next day they saw a small article in a local newspaper about a light phenomenon that people had seen flying northwards. A deer in the headlights. Last Friday my family and I loaded up in my dad's truck to help him drop off a side-by-side he sold online. On our way home driving down a back road, a car coming down the other lane flashed its high beams at us. It only took us a second to figure out they're trying to warn us of the deer that was about to cross the road ahead of us. We slowed down enough to let the deer run across and joked about the close call. That was almost a week ago, and nobody has brought it up, nor have I thought about it since. This morning I was on my way to work. My shift starts pretty early in the morning, so it was still dark out. As I was driving, a car came down the opposite lane. As it did, I locked in on its headlights, and the high beam/deer situation popped into my head. It never flashed its lights at me. It passed me and looked ahead just in time to see a deer walk across the road. I slowed down and swerved just in time to avoid hitting the deer with the passenger side light. I live in western PA, so deer crossings are common. It's just strange that exact thought popped into my head at that exact time. A couple of family members said it sounded like somebody trying to warn me. Could it be a coincidence? Probably. Could have been some kind of sign or warning from beyond? I don't know. A neat idea, though. UFOs over the Wisconsin Northwoods. So, this happened last summer, but I've been thinking about it recently and figured this was as good a place as any to talk about it. I just want to convey my experience to you, and I'm hoping you all can share strange experiences you guys might have had in the Northwoods region as well. I'm from sort of central Wisconsin. If you live in the rural Midwest, you know that there's very rarely anything for young people to do in the evenings besides drink or else drive around aimlessly for hours, preferably not in that order. A friend and I are fond of the latter. Last August, or thereabouts, that friend and I drove up north a ways into the Nicolet National Forest, just cruising down the highway through the woods for the sake of it in the dark. We go up north a ways and meander through some backroads for a bit, taking in the trees and joking about how every road in these parts is a stereotypical horror movie setting, and eventually pull over into a small clearing to just get out, listen to music, and look at the stars, vibe, as it were. It's a clear night, the sky here is relatively free of light pollution compared to the area immediately around our hometown, but it still isn't the sort of spectacular darkness you get in the Upper Peninsula or out west. There's usually a farmhouse or lake house with electricity and a landline relatively nearby no matter where you are, at least until you start getting a little closer to the Michigan border. After a while, my friend points out to me a certain star, one he says was moving. Looking at it, I think it's a satellite or plane, a white light that's indistinguishable from the stars, cruising smoothly through the sky at a notable pace. Then suddenly, after a few minutes of observation, it stops on a dime. Then the light just goes out altogether, vanishing completely. We spend a few minutes speculating on what it could be, with no good explanations, a helicopter, or a drone maybe? That's when things get really odd. We begin to notice that there are multiple stars just like the first one, in various parts of the sky, each moving in smooth, independent paths, sometimes stopping instantly, sometimes turning on a dime, and sometimes just vanishing. I don't remember how many there were, but maybe as many as a dozen. Then, we noticed that the entire horizon in one direction, I forget which, is periodically lighting up white, as if there were a nasty thunderstorm rolling in. However, the weather was perfectly clear, and there was absolutely no sound, after we stopped the music, of course, accompanying it beside the generic insect noises and wind of a typical night. I forget how long this went on for, but eventually it all subsided. We got back in the car and went home. The best explanation I can come up with is some combination of a drone swarm and some related operation on the ground nearby, but I can't fathom what anybody would be doing with something like that in the middle of the Wisconsin Northwoods. To this day it's one of the only really inexplicable things that has happened to me. I'm wondering if anybody has any explanations for this, debunking or otherwise. I'm also curious to hear some supernatural or high strangeness experiences that people have had in Wisconsin or the Northwoods specifically. I had no idea what the town was called. It was located in Nebraska. I was like an hour or two outside of Omaha, heading towards Colorado. My gas light came on, and I pulled off the interstate/main route. Small town a few miles off the beaten path. A real one stoplight, a grocery store, and a gas station type of joint. It's getting later on in the evening, and there's some gathering going on at this gas station. I'm from a small town myself, so I get it. People will congregate anywhere if there's nowhere else. Immediately, a couple of people are looking at me quizzically. As I'm sure a very large man you've never seen in your podunk town suddenly appearing in a car with main plates is fairly interesting. I just nod politely and go inside. Piss, snack, drink, and head to the counter to pay for gas and cigarettes. This place had the old analog pumps to paint a further picture. Where the numbers slowly roll on the dial, no electronics, the station itself was pretty small but had minimal seating that was all full. The place was honestly pretty dirty, and multiple people were just openly smoking inside, and it was in 2014. So I hadn't seen that in quite a few years. The clerk was nice enough at first, until I spoke. I never thought I had much of an accent. Given a thick Mainer accent can be hard to decipher even if you've lived there your whole life, like I had to that point. But apparently, I was instantly pegged. The tone totally changed. Not from around here, With an odd look. No, just passing through, decided to move on a whim. Packed up my stuff and left a couple of days ago. Heading west. I was met with silence, pursed lips, a slow nod, and a very odd look. Well, thanks, have a good night. Was about all I could say. Got no response. Just stares. As I'm leaving, I noticed that the conversation from when I came in had died out, and I could feel more eyes on me. At this point, I'm getting uncomfortable. I'm standing there watching the dial on the pump move slow as molasses. I noticed more and more people outside the station starting to look at me. Gesturing their beer bottles and cigs towards my car and making mention of me, I heard something about my license plate from a couple of groups. Some guys had come out from inside and joined a couple of the smaller groups. Glancing and glancing. Muttering amongst themselves. Anyone who's been through it knows the energy in the air when something bad is brewing. There was this weird hum building, and the tension was rising. I'm trying to calm myself down by saying there's no way that they'd do anything. I literally said nothing but hello, answered a question, and said, thank you. What the duck could their problem even be? But being from rural Maine, I'm no stranger to intoxicated, ignorant rednecks with a bone to pick. They fit the bill. After what seemed like an eternity, my car was full. As I am putting the pump nozzle back on, I notice two individuals approaching from the back/side parking lot while several others are staring at me. They don't look happy, and one is snickering to himself and tapping his buddy's arm with a sneering scowl, looking right at me. So obviously my instinctual reaction was duck this. I hop in the car quick as Mr. Giggles gives out a deep, hostile, hey, while they increase their walk to nearly a jog. They were pretty much to my car as I left with a quickness. Hearing another hey. And a glass bottle shattering on the pavement behind me. Pussycat. One of the trucks emerges from the rear lot, beaming at me and accelerating rapidly to catch up. As I'm very much hauling ass. I swear he was trying to get into position a couple of times to pit me or something. Dude was obviously drunk too, or just ducking with me, probably both. All over the road, blaring the horn. I got on the on-ramp to the interstate and prepared for this to drag out all the way until the first state cop I could find. But I look back and see this idiot rip the e-brake, whip the truck around, and lay smoking rubber as he guns it back in the direction of the gas station. About 20 minutes of deep breathing and 3 cigarettes later, I was able to finally unclench my ass. To this day, I have no clue what I did other than exist and not be from that town. Which I guess in a lot of towns is enough, lol. Something crossed the road. Hey all. I've been an avid Bigfoot enthusiast all my life and have occasionally been active here. I'm also a skeptic, and as such, I've always stopped short of deciding if I do or don't believe in Bigfoot. I've spent many hours outdoors and have had an odd experience or two, but nothing that I would describe as definitive or conclusive. However, 2 days ago, Tuesday, May 13, 2025, I saw something very strange. I'm not saying for sure that it was Bigfoot, but I haven't been able to think of a different explanation, so who knows? It's not a particularly compelling or sensational encounter, but I thought the folks here may find it interesting. I was driving in an area of the Willamette National Forest in Oregon, forgive me, but I do not wish to give the exact location on here, to check out several campgrounds in the area, as I intend to go camping there next month. I decided to drive a ways further up the road just for fun. The road I was on would eventually cross over the crest of the Cascades and come down the other side. This region is somewhat popular for recreation and logging, however, during this time of year, very few people are present, which is why I enjoy off-season camping. Anyway, it was around 1:30 p.m. I was driving east on a paved one-lane road. The grade was somewhat steep, and I was traveling uphill. The road was curving gently to the right. Up ahead, maybe 20 to 30 yards, I saw something. It quickly crossed the road from left to right. A portion of the road was obscured by trees as it was on a curve, so I only saw the thing for a very brief moment. It was perhaps only 1 or 2 seconds. However, it was undeniably an extraordinary sight. The thing I saw was upright and fairly tall. I'm reasonably confident it was as big as an adult man or larger, but not ridiculously big. It wasn't 10 feet tall or anything. But it could easily have been 6 or 7. It was a light brown or tan color. Its shape was somewhat boxy. It lacked sharp corners and had a bulky, unshaped appearance. It was maybe the size of a refrigerator, just a bit slimmer. I was too far away and saw it for too short a time to make out any fine details such as a head or face or arms. I do believe I saw it taking a step with what would have been its right leg. Of course I immediately thought it must be Bigfoot. But I immediately shot that down and tried to think of what else it could have been. I thought of a person on a bicycle, as it seemed to me it moved fluidly, almost gliding across the road. I ruled out a bike since there was no trail where it crossed, and I would have passed it while driving. A deer also occurred to me because of the color, but obviously deer don't walk upright. These thoughts occurred to me as I drove up to the spot where the animal crossed. I slowed my car down nearly to a stop when I reached the spot. I didn't get out to look, which I regret now. In the moment, I was thinking that I had seen something ordinary and that my mind had just played a trick on me. Plus, if I had seen a large animal, there was a small chance it might pose a threat to me, and I was unarmed aside from my Shih Tzu, Toby. The spot where the thing crossed was somewhat intriguing. To the left/north there is a steep hillside leading up to a ridge, however, there was a bit of a low saddle at the point where the thing had crossed. I looked at a map and saw that there is a small lake a few hundred yards to the north. To the right/south there is an abandoned and overgrown old Forest Service road that doesn't appear to lead anywhere other than deeper into the woods. I couldn't see down this road a significant distance, as it drops off steeply. Whatever crossed the road would absolutely have crossed from the saddle on the left to the abandoned road on the right. Anyway, that's my whole story. I drove a few miles further up before turning around and heading back down. I slowed down as I crossed the spot again and scanned the sides of the road, but of course I saw nothing. I do very much regret not getting out to look for tracks or something. Oh well. I'm certainly not saying that I definitely saw a Sasquatch. I'm not saying that I didn't. I don't know what I saw. I don't think it was deer. I don't think it was a bear. There is no chance it was human. I don't know. What do you all think? Seven Sisters Road. Seven Sisters Road is a county road just outside of Nebraska City. It's rumored that a farmhand went crazy and took his 3 daughters out and hung them one by one on 3 different hills along Road L. Afterwards he shot each girl in the chest with his shotgun just to make sure they were dead and then himself. It varies in most stories as to why he did this, but I can't remember off the top of my head the reasons. And that's the legend, or at least the version I had been told. Now after hearing this story about 1,000,000 times, I and my friends were completely sold. I and 4 other friends piled up in the car and began the drive to Seven Sisters Road at about 8 p.m. We had another group of 3 in a different car following us, and, just like a horror movie, halfway through the trip they took a wrong turn and got separated. My group was completely unaware until we got to the spot at exactly 10 p.m. and got a few bars of service. We quickly hashed out a plan to wait for the second group before we fully explored. So, my friend, let's call him C, and I got out of the car and started running up and down the hill, not taking anything seriously. Now, as one would expect in Nebraska, Where we had nothing but miles and miles of cornfields, we were surrounded, and at the top of this hill was a farmhouse with all its lights out. My friend C and I had found a strange dip in the corn that turned out to be a small path, so we took it. Halfway down the path, I and C stopped for some reason, and everything got super quiet. Then, right smack between the two of us, we heard a man with a very deep voice clear his throat. None of my friends had that deep of a voice, and C and I were looking directly at each other. It felt right in my face. We bolted out of the corn to find our 3 other friends only a couple feet down the road from us. My friend Jay gasped and ran back to the car before we could answer when they asked what happened and if we were okay. Later we found out that she saw a man standing deep in the corn, and when she gasped, his head snapped in her direction. We followed her, unsure of what just happened. We kept asking and asking, but she wouldn't tell us. So I and C shared what we saw, and the group was like, okay, let's not leave the car. So after a few minutes we got a choppy call from the second group, and they were lost. After getting their address, we left to find them. Eventually we found ourselves on this long stretch of road with no turnoffs for at least 2 miles and no houses on either side. Soon, we noticed that farther down the road, we could see 2 headlights tucked off to the side. Thinking that was them, we sped up a little, but after 5 to 10 minutes of driving, we realized the lights had completely disappeared. We continued on for a while until we found the group. We explained to them what had happened, and they were all super excited and wanted to go back to Road L. We all got back in our cars and began driving. My friend M unplugged his phone from the radio, which caused everything to be dead silent for most of the drive. That is, until we started down one of the 7 hills along the stretch. The actual radio station, 88.7, started playing a creepy synth tune on repeat. Everyone in the car looked at one another, our faces completely ghost white. After a moment, we realized the music was on loop, and Jay and I both exclaimed, "Nope." We exited the vehicle to await the group's arrival. I was standing close enough to the open car door to barely hear it playing, and once the group parked behind us, it completely stopped. We tried to explain to the group what happened, and they didn't believe us. They all thought we were ducking with them because no matter what we did to the radio, it wouldn't play it again. So eventually the second group rolled their eyes and said they were going home because it was well past midnight. We followed suit, scared that we were messing with things we shouldn't be. That night I dreamt I was deep in the corn with C and M, and there was a big black mass behind them, and the 2 were screaming in agony until the mass went in their mouths and down their throats along with mine. No one else shared dreams if they had any, but M was having insomnia all summer and hardly ever slept, and when he got home, he slept 13 hours straight. It's odd. It was all completely insane. An encounter deep in the mountains of northern Idaho. This is a story that was told to me by one of my firearms instructors named Chris. In northern Idaho, deep in the Rocky Mountains, there is a cabin that runs a cattle ranch. Chris's brother knows the owner and invited Chris to spend a weekend up there for some hunting and hiking. The brothers gathered their supplies and a few of their best pals and took off to the mountains. As they were driving up the winding Idaho roads, his brother issued a cryptic warning. Sometimes the cattle escape into the woods and need to be tracked down. The owner of the ranch has seen strange creatures in the forest. I'm not messing around. Everyone laughed and didn't take the warning seriously. Within the hour they arrived at the cabin. On the second day in the mountains, Chris decided to go on an afternoon hunt with one of his friends. They drove down a back road into the forest until the road ended a few miles from the cabin. They got out and walked to the nearby creek, then split off, with one person going upstream and one person going downstream. After walking for a ways, Chris came to a silty deposit where he noticed a foul odor and a broken pine tree that was green and healthy. The trunk was snapped in the direction of the water. There were 4-finger indentations in the tree bark, like it had been squeezed and pulled down by a massive hand. Sap bubbled from the compressed bark. On the ground he discovered numerous huge footprints with 5 toes stamped into the silt. He followed them and counted 73 beautiful tracks that led to another snapped green pine tree. This tree also had big finger marks on it and was facing in the direction of the water. Tracks danced all around this tree. The smell was now overwhelming. Chris became so spooked that he immediately ran back to the truck. His friend had shot a deer, and they quickly drove back to the cabin with it. At the cabin, Chris explained the situation to everyone. That night, 6 men from the cabin armed themselves, each with a rifle and a pistol, and returned by truck to the end of the dirt road. They parked the truck facing the creek and then walked on foot to the edge of the water. It was a moonless starry night, but the horrible smell still lingered. The band of hunters waited and, at one point, howled into the night, calling for the creature. Chris thought he could hear something moving in the forest, but the creek was too loud to be sure. He decided to walk alone upstream and into the woods to get a clearer sound. He could hear that there was definitely something big making its way through the pines. He ran back to the hunters and warned them that something was approaching. Moments later, from both up and downstream, they began to hear branches snapping and footsteps thudding. The sounds came from both directions, closing in on the group. The footsteps grew louder and louder until the booming crunch of a log under the surface of the mud spooked them so much that they all ran back to the truck. In less than 2 minutes, they made it back to the vehicle. The moment they fired up the truck and turned on the headlights, they could see 2 massive bipedal hairy creatures moving up the creek in the location they had just retreated from. The creatures' eyes shone from the truck's headlights. All of the men had clear shots, but all took flight back to the cabin in terror. The stench greeted them upon their return. They feared that with the slain deer outside, the creatures would be drawn to the property. They all slept curled up with their guns that night, but no more signs of the creatures would be found. I told you, little brother, I was not ducking around. He figures he ran into a family of them. There was a wild look in his eyes as he turned to me and said, I know they exist. Odd encounter on the highway at 1 a.m. I had a really weird encounter on the road last weekend that I'm really hoping someone can explain. I'm not totally convinced it's paranormal, but I'd love to hear anyone's explanation. So basically my fiancé and I were driving near the Boston area after having dinner. We were on the highway at about 1 a.m., and we noticed a car driving ahead of us, nothing out of the ordinary until we passed it. My fiancé was in the passenger seat just looking out the window when she noticed that the car we just passed had a person sitting there just holding a lit candle. She told me to slow down to let them pass us again so I could take a look and make sure she wasn't seeing things, and sure enough, I saw it too. The passenger was holding a lit candle, with the driver and back seat passenger all just looking straight ahead, not even bothering to look over at us like you would at a passing car. We looked at each other afterward like, okay, you just saw what I saw, and it was weird. Then the car just kind of went away and took an exit, I think, because I didn't see it again after we passed it. What was weird about it too was that both of the front passengers looked extremely pale/white with gray/white hair. They were staring straight ahead almost unblinkingly. The male passenger who was holding the candle sort of had it up near his face. We couldn't see the back passenger well, and from what I remember, the woman driving was wearing red. This entire week I've been trying to wrap my head around it. Was someone trying to do a seance while driving, maybe on a stretch of road where they lost a loved one? Was it a phantom car? Or is there some other normal but strange explanation not necessarily tied to the paranormal? I've been trying to think of cases for the latter but can't come up with anything rational. This is my first time sharing, mostly due to wanting to get someone else's input on this or if I'm just overreacting here. I once drove to my friend's country house alone. The night was pretty peaceful and nice. This was like a 2.5-hour drive, and to get there you have to go through this really old off-map road, but it wasn't my first time driving there, so I wasn't feeling anxious or anything. Anyway, this time, like a minute after I came up to that road, I got this really strange feeling, like something was following me. I checked the rearview mirror, but nothing was there. I told myself it was just fatigue from my long shift. So I continued on my way, and 5 minutes after, I saw this lady in the middle of the road. It was strange, as there aren't any houses around there, and the road isn't exactly a place where you'd go for an evening walk. I stopped because I thought maybe she somehow got lost and asked her if she needed help. She says to me she doesn't remember how she got here, and I tell her I'll take her back home because she said her house is near where I was going. She hopped in, and we drove off, and I dropped her off at her house. She got off and thanked me, and I continued to my friend's house. I tell him about her, and he looks at me and goes, "Nobody lived in that house for years. The family there died on the off-map road in a car accident." I'm thinking he's just joking because I just dropped a lady off at that house and saw her walk in. We go to sleep, and that night I get sleep paralysis. That night, it wasn't demons or anything, but I'm prone to that, it always freaks me out. I saw that lady crawl up my bed whispering stuff that I couldn't comprehend. I freak out, obviously. She's standing on top of me now and touching my face. Her face is all weird, full of cuts and bruises and deformed. I finally managed to wake up, and I'm feeling extremely paranoid and anxious. Anyway, the next day I decide to drive back to that house where I dropped her off, and oh my. The house doesn't look like anyone has lived there in ages. I go online and try to find some article about the accident my friend told me about. I find a picture of that lady, and the accident happened right there where I picked her up the night before. So yeah, I still get the chills when I think of it. I saw the Michigan Dog Man. I was driving home from a friend's house one evening a few years ago, sometime between March and June of 2017. I remember the date because it coincided with a grueling stint as a farmhand at a horse ranch. We had spent the evening reading, conversing, and watching the sun set. We may have lit a pipe and sipped a dram of whiskey. I cannot distinguish the gathering from many others like it. With that handful of close friends, we routinely stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning. On this particular occasion, I left around 2:30 in the morning. Given the hour, I was worn out but not particularly sleepy, nor was I under the influence of alcohol or other intoxicating substances. My family's house, where I was living at the time, was about 25 minutes south down US 23. The area occasionally gets so foggy in the wee hours of the morning that it is easier to drive with no headlights, but this night was fairly clear. I got off at exit 25, Plank Road. The ramp is a couple hundred feet long, with a clump of trees to the left and a strip of woods with a small lake behind it on the right. The woods are separated from the pavement by a short, steep downward slope. On the shoulder of the road, about 2/3 of the way up on the right-hand side, lay a carcass. My heart skipped a beat. My first thought was, that's a human body. Although I had been slowing down while exiting the highway, I initially drove right past the body and only came to a stop at the stop sign, which was about 50 feet away. But curiosity made me return. I put the car in reverse until I was alongside the carcass. It was covered in light brown, shaggy hair. It was stretched out face down. It had definite hips and shoulders, so that I was certain it was not a deer. Roadkill deer are extremely common around here. I have observed them in all stages of decomposition, and this was certainly not a deer. This observation lasted just a few seconds, but then the loneliness and the late hour got the better of me, and I drove on. It did not cross my mind to take a picture or exit my vehicle for a closer look. It is easy to criticize this behavior from the armchair, but let me assure you that getting out of there fast was more important to me than snapping a picture. Get a picture, lose your life. The next day around noon I went back to see if it was still there, but it was not. There was a large wet patch on the pavement, about the shape of the creature, from which protruded several wet streaks that abruptly ended, as if someone had dragged the carcass up onto a trailer. Again, it did not cross my mind to get out and collect first samples or sniff around for a scent. As I said, I was not cryptozoologically minded at that point. Google searches and local records could not shed light on the particular occurrence. The only other people I know who claimed to have seen them were my brother and sister, who had been getting off the exit several hours earlier. Their description coincided with mine, as did his conclusion that it could not have been a deer. Also, the fact that my level-headed sister saw it, too, has lent credibility in the eyes of others. I did not know it at the time, but apparently Michigan has a legend of a dog man, a half dog, half man that can walk erect. It is very quick and often spotted near roads, peeking out of the woods and making faces at cars. The first recorded sighting was in 1887. Apparently, and this fact quite surprised me, sightings of it are by far the most frequent in 10-year cycles, starting with that initial sighting. That is, it is most often seen in years ending in 7. Why this would be the case, I have no idea. Perhaps it was just a coincidence that this was 2017? Backroads of SC. A few days ago, my friend and I were driving on the backroads of South Carolina, specifically toward Clio, working our way up to NC. We are from NY and doing a backroad road trip photographing beautiful scenery. It was around 12 to 1 a.m., and we were talking about skinwalkers, not using that word aloud, referring to them as skinnies, and haunted Appalachia, since the backroads reminded me of all the stories I enjoy listening to on here. I have my camera with me and wanted to photograph an abandoned home on the side of the road with my strong flashlight. We approach the home. I'm in the passenger seat of the car and shining the flashlight directly at the home and immediately see a Jack Terrier, dog, on the front porch. I thought, not weird, we are in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's a stray? I quickly put my flashlight in my lap, and it's not turning off. I'm clicking every button, and it's burning fast. My skin was immediately burned. I disconnected the battery and said, that was concerning. And we keep driving. Suddenly, I'm adjusting settings on my camera, and it completely isn't working either, after using it all day photographing. I eventually just put everything down and became frustrated since I wanted to take some night shots. Camera and light clearly fail. About 5 minutes later, we are driving with open fields to both sides of us. I'm trying to get the flashlight to work and pointing it out into the open field while driving. As soon as it turns on, I see eyes, 30 pairs at least. Presumably deer. Spooked me a bit after the skinwalker stories. 5 minutes pass. We approach a stop sign and see a little elderly Chihuahua, dog, walking on the side of the road. I feel an overwhelming urge to scream, pull over so I can help this little Chihuahua find his owners. Mind you, it is past 1 a.m. now. Back to back, 2 dogs? Nothing working? No service? My friend keeps driving. He's saying no, we aren't stopping for absolutely anything. I feel guilty. Also, having a senior small dog at home, I desperately wanted to hop out of that car. Is this common down here in the rural South? Did I encounter something possibly spiritual or something trying to lure us after speaking about skinwalkers/hauntings of Appalachia? Any insight would help. Woman in white on the side of the road? Hey all. Wanted to get your opinion on something I saw when I was younger. For context, I was probably about 11 or 12 at the time, and I lived in a tiny town in Florida called Mulberry. We basically had a McDonald's, a local corner store, and then a couple of mom and pop shops. All are about 10 to 20 minutes apart by car. My neighborhood is connected to Highway 60, which is a pretty infamous spot for bad accidents. One day, it was around 11 p.m. when we decided to get McDonald's for dinner. My dad was a truck driver, so getting dinner late wasn't too uncommon. I and my brother, he would have been around 18 to 20, tagged along, and we drove over to the restaurant. Streets were pretty dead, and the drive-thru was thankfully empty. We were all talking about something on the way back when it went silent. On the right side of the road was a woman walking. Something about the way she walked was just odd. Her arms didn't raise or move with her steps, they just sort of hung there. Her pace was slower than a normal walking pace. She wore a super long, white dress that was practically untouched. I remember my dad kind of had a weirded out laugh, like, why was she wearing that at this hour? The weirdest part was that moments after we drove past, we couldn't recall what she looked like at all. We all could recall the long hair and the long dress, but we all collectively blanked on facial features. When I turned, she was still walking in the same direction at the same pace, quickly fading out of view into the dark. Now, it's 100% possible we all just got spooked due to the time of day, but it's something that stuck out in my memory to this day. It was rare to see anyone walking on the side of the road there, and especially so at night. At that hour, there was really nowhere for her to be going except for the McDonald's, which only offered drive-through service. The direction that she was walking from had no houses or structures for several miles, meaning she would have been walking for at least an hour to be where she was when we saw her. On top of that, not many people even walked near the highway like that due to the rate of accidents. I don't know, what do you all think? It just feels so off to me, even years later. This dog man encounter almost cost me my life. I was driving down a mountain road somewhere in the middle of Idaho. I was coming from my best friend's house on my way back to Boise. I was about halfway home when my girlfriend called me. She then broke up with me over the phone. We had been together for well over a year. I didn't take the news very well, and while I was in a state of severe melancholy, I found myself driving down this winding road in the middle of the night. It didn't take long at all before I noticed the flashing lights behind me, so I pulled over on the side of the road and waited anxiously for the officer to approach. The officer asked me if I knew how fast I was going. I didn't have a clue. He told me I was going under 10 miles an hour and that I was at risk of having someone slam into the back of me. I apologized and explained that I was experiencing some emotional turmoil. He didn't seem very interested in my excuse. Instead, he took my license and information and told me to sit tight while he walked back to his car. While I sat there, overwhelmed by the many memories of my girlfriend and my ex-girlfriend, I glanced outside through the windshield and sat up straight nervously. Just up from my vehicle behind the tree line, I could almost make out someone standing to the left side of a pine tree. I stared at it for a few minutes, unsure if what I was seeing was really there. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there. I swore I could see the outline of its head. Just then the officer tapped on my window. I rolled it down, and he handed me back my license. He was letting me off with just a warning this time. I thanked him, and then as he started to walk away, I told him I swore I could see someone standing off in the trees watching us. I pointed in its direction, though I couldn't see it now. The officer looked at me funny and took out his flashlight, waving it through the trees. "Well, I don't see anything," he told me. He then gave me an almost pitying look and told me there was a cutoff just up the road and that I should maybe stop there and get some rest. He was worried about my mental state. In all honesty, so was I. I thanked him as he left and looked at myself in the mirror. I did look like a wreck. I made a concerted effort to recall what I had previously seen, but it was no longer there. Maybe it never was there, I thought. I followed the highway for a few miles and found the cutout the officer mentioned and pulled over. I shut my eyes and tried to clear my head, but it was pointless. I couldn't get her out of my head. It still didn't seem real. Part of me believed that if I could reach her on the phone and explain my feelings, she might reconsider. I took out my phone and called her. She answered, and I could immediately hear her yelling at me, but none of it mattered now. I dropped the phone onto the floorboard as I stared in horror at this large, beastly-looking creature standing in front of my car. It had to be over 7 feet tall and completely covered in dark brown fur. It was built more like that of a man than that of an animal. Its large head resembled that of a wolf with 2 bright yellowish eyes staring right at me. Its arms were very long, and its hands were very human-like, with long claws instead of fingernails. The mere sight of them along with its head was scary enough. But when it let out an ear-deafening roar and revealed its long, sharp fangs, I just about relieved myself right there inside my car. It stood there afterwards, staring at me, breathing heavily in and out. I started up my car and threw it in reverse and slammed on the gas pedal as hard as I could. I didn't bother looking behind me, but I should have because I ended up going right into a ditch just behind the cutout. Now completely stuck and high-centered, my tire spun and spun. I wasn't going anywhere. I thought I was about to be torn apart and eaten by this creature and began to scream and cry. I just sat there holding the steering wheel, way too afraid to look outside. My heart was beating out of my chest. I didn't want to die despite how alone I truly felt that night. I wanted to live no matter what. Just then something started to tap on my driver's side window. I screamed out loud and cried, "No. Please." When I heard a voice ask me if I was okay. I looked up and saw a woman, probably in her mid-40s, and her car parked off the side of the road. She asked me if I was in shock, I guess from how I was acting. I screamed that we needed to get out of here, that it wasn't safe. There was something in the road that looked like a wolf. She then said she had seen it and asked if that's how I ended up in the ditch trying to avoid hitting it. I just looked at her puzzled and asked, "What did you see exactly?" She said it looked something like a large dog or wolf and was sitting outside my car when she pulled up. She said it ran off into the forest quickly after it saw her. She said nothing about it, standing upright and looking like something conjured up from the pits of hell. It wasn't long after that the officer I had a run-in with earlier showed up and called out a wrecker to pull me out. He took down my statement as to what happened. All I told him was I swerved to avoid hitting a wolf. I'm not sure if he believed me or not from how I was acting. What I saw was indeed terrifying, and I will never forget it. I knew none of them would have believed me about how it stood upright looking like a man and how it roared at me. The entire event seemed so surreal to me. I will never take that highway again. The only good thing, I guess, that came from the whole experience is it definitely took my mind off my ex. Back in 1984, when I was 12 years old, I had my sighting of a female Sasquatch in Graham, Washington. Coming home from Tacoma, my dad turned onto the gravel road that led to our place. We were living in a fifth-wheel trailer at the time while my dad was building a home on the 5 acres of land he was buying. As we transitioned from the paved road to the gravel one, I briefly glimpsed an eye-shaped object far ahead on the passenger side of the road. I told my dad what I saw, and he told me whatever it was would move once it saw us coming. The road had a few small dips and rises, so from time to time, I would lose sight of the eye shine. As we came up over a couple of the rises, the eye shine was still there. I kept telling my dad it hadn't moved. I asked him to turn on his high beams. My dad had installed new driving lights shortly after moving to the area and had angled them outward as far as he could because of all the animals in it. This road had no streetlights, and when darkness fell, it became extremely dark. As we came up over the next rise, he turned on his high beams and those new driving lights. There she was, squatting next to the gravel road, no more than 50 feet in front of us. When the lights hit her, she turned at the waist and held up her left arm to block out the light. When she turned, I noticed her breasts, the color of the skin on the palm of her hand, and the hair hanging from her forearm. She was between 7 and 8 feet tall, with an estimated weight of 450 to 475 pounds. She resembled Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film but wasn't as thick. Her hair was different as well. She didn't have the conical head, but it wasn't a normal shape either. She had a pronounced brow ridge, and what sticks with me the most was her thin upper lip. Her nose was like ours but on a bigger scale, kind of pressed in, but not too much, with a little flare to her nostrils. As she turned to her right, she took 2 steps and entered the tree line. I recall crashing into the front seat's floorboard as she turned. My dad didn't speed up or slow down, he just kept his speed the same. I slowly poked my head up and looked out the window, where I could see her standing in the tree line, watching us. Due to the ambient light from my dad's lights, I could see her blink her eyes. We were about 150, 200 feet from our driveway. As we pulled in, I didn't wait for my dad to stop the car. I opened the door, jumped out, and ran up onto the deck. I remember skipping the 4 steps, unlocking the door, running inside, and jumping into my dad's bed. Seconds later, I heard a car door slam and my dad walking up the stairs into the trailer, carrying my little brother. After putting my dead to the world little brother to bed, he went to the fridge and cupboards, pulling out fruit and vegetables. He walked outside with the food and placed it on one of the tables on the deck. Then he went to the shed and brought out a ladder. Up on a metal pole about 15 feet tall and attached to the deck, he had built a wooden platform at the top. His plan was to put a bird feeder up there because he was an avid bird watcher. He put all the food on this platform and then greased the pole from top to bottom. I was puzzled as to why he did this. I asked, why? He said, to keep animals away. I asked again, are you referring to raccoons? He said, yep. Raccoons. He asked if I wanted to sleep with him, and I said yes. Later, at about 1 or 2 a.m., I opened my eyes to the sound of the boards on our deck cracking and groaning, like something massive had just stepped onto it. I looked at my dad, and all he could do was press his finger to his lips, telling me to be quiet. Just then, I heard and felt something big and heavy run past the trailer wall I was lying against, followed by more cracking and groaning as something else massive stepped onto the deck. Looking at my dad again, I knew he could tell I was terrified. That's when we heard what I can only describe as talking. But it wasn't like anything I had heard before, until decades later when I heard what is known as samurai chatter. It was similar but had other aspects to it. I must have cried myself to sleep because the next thing I knew, the sun was shining. I jumped over my dad, ran to the door, and swung it open. Running to the railing, I jumped on top of it and could clearly see. All the food was gone. It was all gone. I shouted for my dad to come out, and as he did, I noticed something. Something had grabbed the pole in multiple spots, then ran a finger all the way down it, wiping the grease onto the railing. I remember my dad the night before, smoking a cigarette outside and talking. I was eavesdropping and heard him say something like, I know you saw us, and you know we saw you. Please don't hurt my boys. We want to make a home here. We mean no disrespect or harm. In October of 1985, my dad almost lost his life in a horrible car accident. We had to move to Tacoma and live with my aunt and uncle while he was recovering. He lost the property, so in the spring of the following year, we went back out to get a few things. When I walked around the trailer one last time, I noticed something intriguing. On every window, there were some kind of prints, as if someone, or something, had been trying to look inside. I wonder. That was my one and only sighting, but not my only encounter. None of us can explain this experience. The events of this story are true. I'd give it was a glitch or a time slip, but it still freaks me out. Once when I was around 9, I was sitting in the back seat of my sister's Jeep Cherokee, along with my cousin. She's also the same age as me. My sister was driving, and my other cousin, around the same age as her, like 17-ish, was in the passenger seat. My sister always took me with her to run errands or on trips to the mall. On this day, my younger cousin was at my house, and we were playing in the backyard, until my sister just had us tag along. Anyway, we're driving on the freeway, and we see a carnival with rides. The Zipper, that crazy unsafe ride with the cages that spin, could be seen, as well as the Ferris wheel. I and my cousin were begging my sister to please take us. She said no and made that same exit. It was the same exact exit to head right on some main road. The carnival was situated to the left. On the ramp, we were on the red light, and my sister said she promised we'll go after she returns this shirt or something, and my older cousin needed to buy these shoes on sale. This was before smartphones and stuff, like the late 90s. Besides myself, everyone in the family knew that my sister was always amazing with directions. She even told us she knew exactly where to park, too, so we didn't have to walk far or deal with the traffic. I specifically remember that when walking into the mall, we could sense a very faint smell of the carnival elephant ears/corn dogs and stuff. We go into the mall for, no more than a half hour and walk to my sister's truck. I and my younger cousin were so happy and excited. All of a sudden, I remember noticing I didn't smell the carnival anymore. It was probably just my excitement, so I didn't even say anything. We drive through the winding parking lots and inner streets to get back to the road we came on, which leads to the freeway. The second we turned, there was nothing. All we saw was a continuous road at both ends of the freeway exits. There were no large gates blocking traffic, no large wires on the ground, and no distant sounds of children screaming and laughing on the rides. No scent of elephant ears. I'll never forget us all just staring at the blank road. My older cousin in the front seat says, "WTH, did they press a button, and the whole carnival just went underground or disappeared?" Nobody laughed, we all thought the same thing. My sister then put her signal on, turning left on the ramp, which was originally blocked a half hour before, and we headed home. There's no way the carnival shut down, packed, and vanished that quickly. Even if they were, the rides were going. Kids were yelling and laughing. It was all lively. So even if they started to close down that same instant, it would be impossible to disassemble the Ferris wheel and all the rides, let alone the barricades to block incoming traffic or the wires and cones. To this day, we all remember this story in perfect detail. None of us can ever explain how this was possible. By far one of the weirdest things I have ever experienced. Small North Florida town encounter. So this was about 2 years ago around October. I was 16, and my friends had just picked me up to spend the night at their house, all girls, ages 14 to 18. Strange stuff always happened at this friend's house. Their property had an old burnt-down cookhouse and an abandoned home from the early 1900s. One night, we arrived at the gate, which was about half a mile off the main road. Their property was vast, spanning hundreds of acres filled with cow fields and forest. So my friend parks, and we're all kind of on edge because it's close to Halloween and we've already experienced a couple creepy goings-on around here, so we decide who's going to get out to unchain the gate. The driver being the oldest and this being her house, she gets out and leaves her door open. I'm in the middle of the backseat cushion between my two other friends who are chatting away while I watch out for my friend. I had a very unsettling feeling, so I kept my eyes peeled. The gate is approximately 7 feet in front of the car, illuminated by the car's lights. The driver reaches the gate, struggles with the chain for a moment, and quickly pulls the gate open before sprinting back to the car. I look for what scared her as she's running back, almost to the door, and I see what looks like a small, 1 foot tall, long, 2 feet long, brown, dog-like creature, almost like a dachshund, wiener dog, but with inverted legs. It ran from one side of the driveway to the other and was gone in the darkness. It was pretty fast, so I couldn't tell if it was hairy or if the brown was its skin. All I know is I'm the only one who saw it. The driver hopped in saying she heard a growling sound. I told her what I saw, and we were all freaked out. They didn't have any small dogs or cats, just 2 big retrievers. To this day I still have no idea what that was. Any thoughts? Highway 95 Ghost Boy. This happened almost a decade ago. My family was moving from Reno, Nevada, to Las Vegas, Nevada. We were separated into 2 cars, the moving truck and the family car. I rode with my mother in the family car, and my younger brother was in the truck with my dad. Somewhere along the long, boring drive through the Nevada desert, I had fallen asleep midday. I awoke from my nap and groggily looked around. After a few minutes, I thought I saw, but can't really say I saw, rather sensed with a different sense, a child on the right side of the road. I found it strange that a child would be alone on the side of a highway in the middle of the desert during the day. However, when I checked the side mirror to see if the child was still there, we were turning a corner, which meant the child was no longer visible. I asked my mom, "Did you see that kid on the side of the road?" And she said, "No, there was no kid. I've been watching the road this whole time, go back to sleep," so I shrugged off the idea and thought nothing more of it. Fast forward to lunchtime, maybe an hour or so later, we decided to meet with my dad and brother at a McDonald's somewhere along the way. When my dad and brother enter, my brother excitedly exclaims, "Did you guys see the ghost?" Shocked, all of us but my dad asked him what he meant. My dad explained that just before Hawthorne, my brother said he saw a ghost boy on the side of the road, with his mouth open and wearing tattered clothes. My brother said he was all green/blue. It honestly hadn't even occurred to me at this point that the kid I faintly saw for a split second was the same as my brother's ghost boy until my mother said, "Wait, Anon, me, said he saw a kid on the side of the road too. Where did you say he saw the ghost boy?" My dad said that he saw him just north of Hawthorne. My mother, interested at this point, recalled that it was north of Hawthorne that I asked about the kid on the side of the road. We talked for hours about the possibility of a ghost boy on the side of the road. I can't for sure say that what I saw was a ghost, and it almost felt like a dream when I saw it. But my brother's vivid imagery of what he saw lends credence to the fact that it was indeed a ghost boy, especially since the drivers watching the road did not see him when he was in plain sight on the side of the road. An unexplainable event occurred at Gravity Hill, NJ, encounter with a shadow figure. I've been trying to make sense of something I experienced years ago, and I'm hoping someone here might have had a similar experience, or at least help shed some light on it. This happened sometime around 2002 to 2003, when I was younger. A group of us, 2 cars, guys in one, girls in the other, decided to visit a place known locally as Gravity Hill, located in New Jersey just across the Delaware River from New Hope, Pennsylvania, and not far from Washington's Crossing Park. If you're not familiar with it, the legend goes that if you stop your car at the bottom of the hill and put it in neutral, ghostly forces will push it up. According to legend, A tragic accident involving a car and a train occurred there, leading the spirits to attempt to push vehicles away from danger. I had been there a few times before and thought it would be fun to show the girls. We did the usual ghost pushes the car uphill thing, which, by the way, really does seem like the car is going uphill, and everyone was having a good time. But that's not the part that's haunted me all these years. As we were leaving, we took a back road that intersects the main one near the hill. I was driving behind the other car when suddenly my radar detector started going off, odd, considering we were out in the middle of nowhere. At the same time, I heard screaming from the car ahead of us. Then, as we passed a farmhouse, I saw something I still can't explain. What I thought was a scarecrow standing in a field next to the road suddenly began hovering, yes, hovering, alongside my car. It was a shadowy, humanoid figure. It didn't move like a person or animal. It just floated, gliding next to us. Then its arm stretched out toward the back seat, where my friend Dante was sitting. My brother and the other two in the back were yelling at me to roll up the windows. My radar detector went off again. I floored it, heart pounding, and we sped out of there until we reached a parking lot near a bridge a few miles away. Everyone in both cars was shaken up, and we all saw the same thing. I still don't know what to make of it. A shared hallucination? Could there be some manifestation of local folklore in our thoughts? Could it be something else entirely? Has anyone experienced anything similar in that area, or anywhere near Gravity Hill? No matter what, don't get stranded on Highway 13. Many people know about how unlucky the number 13 is. I didn't believe in the superstition of the number 13 because I had never experienced anything unfortunate connected to it. That was until I got stranded on Highway 13. It was late at night when I was driving down the road. I had noticed how desolate the road seemed. I had not seen another car on it the entire trip. Admittedly, I got a bit lost while traveling nearby. Thick woods lined both sides of the road, giving an eerie vibe. I drove very cautiously, partly due to my lack of knowledge about my location and partly due to the fear that an animal could suddenly jump before my headlights. Suddenly, my car began to behave strangely. My headlights flashed on and off, and, worried something was wrong, I pulled over to the side of the road. After parking and turning the car off, I got out and checked the engine and headlights. Strangely, there was nothing wrong, so I got back in and went to turn it on. Then it wouldn't start. I tried multiple times, but each time the car failed to turn on. I laid my head against my steering wheel and sighed. Of course it wouldn't work when I needed it to. I stayed there for a few minutes before a feeling of dread suddenly settled over me. My hair stood as I looked up. I could barely see in front of me, but I could make out a pale figure a few feet in front of my vehicle. It stood there, motionless. Chills covered my body as the air grew colder. I quickly reached into my center console for a flashlight, but by the time I turned it on, the figure was gone. I blinked quickly several times before assuming that it must have been my imagination. I set the flashlight down and grabbed my phone to dial 911. My initial call resulted in no service. I called again, but to no avail. Finally, with one final attempt, my call went through. "This is 911, what's your emergency?" A man answered on the other end. "Yes, hello, my car broke down on Highway 13, I responded hastily. "Okay, do you know where on the road you are?" "No," I began to hear static. "Ma'am? Can you repeat that?" His voice was overtaken by static. What the hell? I barely had time to sort my thoughts before a new voice bellowed from my phone. "I can see you, but can you see me?" I dropped the phone immediately as disembodied laughter came from it. The voice was shrill but deep, like multiple people were speaking at once. The call abruptly ended as my phone flashed no service. I grabbed my flashlight once more and turned it on, shining it out my windows. I didn't see anything, but the chills down my spine continued. I never believed in the paranormal, but even at that moment, I was trying to find a reasonable explanation for everything that had just occurred. Steeling my nerves, I got out of my vehicle with my flashlight in hand. I searched around my car, looking for anything that could explain what just happened. I had walked to the edge of the road, shining the light into the woods, when I heard a twig snap. It made me jump, but I couldn't see anything. I took a deep breath. It's okay, it was most likely an animal. Taking a step closer to the woods, I heard the sound of a crying child. "Hello? Are you okay? I'm going to come to you, so keep making sounds." I called out. I entered the woods despite every instinct of mine telling me not to. I just couldn't ignore the voice. It might have been an actual child lost in the woods. After a little while, I came to a small clearing in the woods where I spotted a small figure. The sound of crying was louder here, so I knew the figure had to be the child. It was squatting on the ground with its back to me. "Hey, it's alright, I'll help you out of here," I said this as I walked up to the child. The crying quieted down, and I went to place my hand on the child's shoulder. I noticed how cold the child felt. "Are you alright?" In that instance, it turned around. Its face morphed into something demonic, and it leapt at me. I screamed in horror and fell back away from it. I quickly stood up, but I didn't see it anywhere. I ran as fast as I could back to my car, praying nothing else would happen. I couldn't explain what I saw with any reason or logic. After a terrifying sprint, I finally made it to my car and got in before locking my doors. I tried turning my car on, but it wouldn't start. "Come on, come on, come on," I shouted before hitting the steering wheel. Almost miraculously, the car managed to start, but there was a serious problem. I couldn't change the gearshift. A pit settled in my stomach as the gearshift moved on its own, and my car started rolling down the road. I tried my door, but it wouldn't unlock. I moved to try my passenger door and even my back doors, but I was trapped. The radio cut on, static emitting from it. That disembodied laugh came through the radio once more. I reached my breaking point and yelled, "What do you want from me?" "What do I want?" "I want your life." It responded as the car accelerated. I quickly moved back to the driver's seat and buckled up. I slammed my foot on the brakes, but they wouldn't budge. Tears fell from my eyes as I knew this was how I was going to die. My high beams flashed on, and I saw a bridge up ahead. My heart sank into my stomach. I struggled more, trying to open my door, roll my windows down, or stop the car, but nothing worked. The radio still had static laughter playing through it. I prayed for something that would save me. I looked back up, and a white wolf now stood in the middle of the road. The car slowed as the radio cut off. I slammed on the brakes, and they actually worked. My car stopped a few feet in front of the white wolf, which stood motionless. I cried from both fear and relief. I could hear sirens in the distance and knew that the police were on their way. The white wolf disappeared before my eyes, leaving me in shock. It wasn't long after that the police arrived and asked me what happened. I tried to retell what I experienced as best as I could, but I couldn't help getting choked up on sobs as I explained what happened. They insisted on taking me to the hospital for a checkup, even though I had no physical injuries. "But what about my car?" I asked. The officer said, "You are too shaken up to drive right now, so we will have one of the officers drive it to the hospital." I agreed and got in his car. Just as he went to leave, I felt an instinct to look to the wood's edge, and there stood that white wolf, watching me. I'm not sure what happened that night, but I am positive that something paranormal tried to kill me. I also believe that the white wolf I saw is a guardian or protector of some kind that saved me. It answered my prayers and saved me from that demonic creature. While I didn't believe in the paranormal before, I strongly believe in it now. Some words of advice for everyone: don't get stranded on Highway 13, or you might see for yourself why the number 13 is feared. Interstate 35 near Goldsby, Oklahoma? At about 2 a.m. this morning, traveling north on I-35 near Goldsby, Oklahoma, I had a strange experience. First, I saw a man on my passenger side of the highway. He was not wearing any reflective gear. No light. There was no car nearby, and there was no exit or town within easy walking distance that I could see. It was so dark out I didn't even see him until I was right up on him and swerved a little from being startled. This was probably unrelated and was honestly probably just a man walking, albeit dangerously, but it was the first startle of a long list on this drive. A feeling of overwhelming fear and dread overcame me several miles later. Almost a panicked feeling, and the hair on my arms and neck stood up. Right after this happened, I came upon a horrible-looking accident in the southbound lanes. There was a semi flipped over, and it was blocking the entire southbound side of the highway. Emergency personnel and news vans were on the scene, and traffic was backed up for quite a stretch. When I stopped shortly afterwards, I wasn't able to find anything on the news about it yet, so I tried to get a little rest and then kept driving. Later in the morning, I stopped again to rest and decided to search again for a news article to see what happened and if everyone was okay. At this time, I wasn't aware of exactly where I was when I saw the accident. I just knew I was a little bit south of Oklahoma City. So I googled something along the lines of I-35 South accident near Oklahoma City. I found a news article with a photo of the accident I saw that stated it occurred near Goldsby at mile marker 100. The article I found stated, thankfully, that nobody was seriously injured but didn't have very much more information. I saw deer nearby and long tire brake marks and shoulder damage on my side of the highway, so I was curious how the accident happened. I wondered if one of the semi-drivers, there were two involved, had hit a deer or blown a tire and ended up in the southbound lanes or something. So I online searched car accident I-35 Goldsby, Oklahoma and found another article from around 1 a.m. the previous morning where another accident had blocked the northbound lanes of the highway at the exact same mile marker. I had to double check the articles to make sure I wasn't mistaken about the area or the times. 2 accidents. The 2 accidents occurred approximately 24 hours apart. The accidents occurred at the exact same mile marker, but on opposite sides of the small grassy median. Unfortunately, in the previous accident, there was a fatality. I also found a few more articles from over the years of serious accidents that were fatal or had severe injuries in the same area. I realize a major highway is bound to have many accidents, but it just seems very strange to me that so many would occur right in that same stretch of highway. The only aspect of this experience that I could possibly attribute to the paranormal was the sudden surge of intense fear and dread that overcame me just before witnessing the accident. That could also be because I was already on alert from seeing and being startled by the man and being on the lookout for deer, but this felt different. This moment felt like terror. The terror was sudden and intense. But I am also curious now about this stretch of highway in Oklahoma. Has anyone else had any strange experiences in this area or know anything about it? I haven't done a lot of research since my initial searches this morning, but I feel very sad for all involved and extremely unsettled about the entire situation. Old Stage Road. The town I grew up in was tiny, and not a very popular one at that. Whenever their name was mentioned in the newspaper, it was either about some poor kid getting shot due to gang activity or something to do with agriculture. So when strange and unexplainable things happen, word goes around fast. Especially for kids with nothing but time on their hands. I grew up hearing the stories about Old Stage Road. My aunt, who had tons of crazy paranormal things happen to her. Being on Old Stage Road was one of them. It was an old country back road that no one really went on anymore. Salinas, California, back in the old day, was the destination of a lot of horrible deaths, and not just gang ones. In the public library they have photos of people getting lynched on Old Stage Road. May they rest in peace, and it was also where there was a Japanese concentration camp back in the war times. So needless to say, it wouldn't be too surprising if there were some angry spirits roaming around. The road connects you to the main highways. My aunt told me once that years ago, she and her then husband were driving out of town, and they decided to take the back road, Old Stage Road. It was getting dark really fast, and my aunt was pregnant. The events are a little foggy, but she explained that it was dark, she was in the passenger seat, and she became tired, so she stared out the window. All she saw were dark images of mountains and trees. Then she said out of nowhere she sees a woman outside. At the same speed as the car, and she turned her head to look at my aunt. The way my aunt's eyes widened and changed when she was describing the woman to me was like she was reliving it all over again in her head. She said the woman's skin was so white it was almost transparent. She looked at least 100 years old with white hair. My aunt said the look the woman had in her eyes was anger and hatred. My aunt screamed and told my uncle to get the heck out of there and to speed up because it's one single road. So he did, and the woman disappeared. He later joked about wanting to go back. They got to their destination and got out of the car. They said on the back windshield were a bunch of tiny handprints, almost as if there were tons of kids pushing the car. My aunt vowed to never go on that old road again. And of course, me, being disobedient and as curious as cats, immediately wanted to go. I met with my friends from high school, and we got some beer and planned to go to Old Stage at 2:50 a.m. so we could be there at 3 a.m. We went, but all it was a road. A scary looking one at that, but no ghosts, no creepy old ladies. Nada. We also discovered it was a place where we could be loud with our music and illegal drinking, and no one would bother us or call the cops. So we decided to go more often in the middle of the night, stupid teenagers, I know. Then one night we got in the car and headed to the road. We stopped at Hangman's Tree. The tree where many were hung, like I earlier described. There was a large wooden cross underneath the tree. My friends wanted to walk alone on the street. Even though we didn't see anything, I was still scared about being anywhere in the middle of the night alone. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to be alone in a car under a haunted tree. So I got out. Nothing happened, just creepy creaks and noises. We got back to the car and drank some more. I looked behind me, and my friend Chris was peeing on the tree, being the biggest bag ever. I told him that wasn't cool to the people who died there and it was disrespectful. He didn't care, he was a stupid drunk kid. He peed, flipped off the tree, and walked to get in the car. Just at that moment we were switching the CD, and we heard "Tau ooh what" on the radio. Everyone was silent until I jumped up and said, "Did you hear that?" My friend replied, "I thought that was you." And we stomped on the gas harder than ever and bolted out of that road. My friend was in the back seat sleeping. We were literally a half-mile away from the public area and from that street when we heard one of the most terrifying screams I have ever heard in my life. It was my friend in the back seat. Right when she screamed, one of the tires blew out. My driving friend didn't care. We were too close to the end of the street to stop, and we were determined not to stay on that street any longer. When we got to the end and in the light around the public, we asked my friend what was wrong. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. But the weird thing was she was asleep through the whole thing, so she couldn't have known what had scared us. She explained she had the worst nightmare. She didn't remember going back to the car with us. She said the last thing she remembers was that we were all walking on the street, and she turned back, and we weren't there. She was alone on the road. She said she was running trying to find us and really pissed off that we left her. That's when she saw a book in the middle of the road. It looked really old, and she bent down to open it. That's when she felt something grab her. Like claws, she said. She looked behind her, and it was an old lady with claws and rotted teeth trying to bite her. That's when she woke up. It's been years since I have been on that road, but the old tales and the murders still happen on that road. And I'm sure there is also another group of dumb teenagers that go there trying to find something that I hope doesn't find them first. Headlights. This story is set in a location that feels less backwoods and more like the country roads of a paranormal tale. Every summer, my family and a few close friends would travel from Southern California to the town of Bridgeport, located in the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains along the CA/NV border. If you've ever been, it's a super cool area, a big biker route to Reno and Tahoe, with excellent outdoor camping and hiking into Yosemite's high country, rich in wildlife, with crazy old history with native tribes and the gold rush of the West, with Bodie Ghost Town nearby, and my favorite is the world-class trout fishing. Mark Twain even once stayed in the town way back in the day, which I thought was cool. The town is small and has your typical 20-building Main Street USA to match the feel, all surrounded by rivers, lush meadows with cattle and horse ranches, and absolutely gorgeous wooded snow-capped mountains. We would often camp up near Twin Lakes just outside of town about 10 miles away, but always made a point to get to town for dinner at this bar, Rhino's, for pizza and beer at least once during the trip. So one night we do this, and afterwards we're on our way back to camp at twilight, just light enough to make out the peaks on the horizon but still densely dark with billions of stars out in force. Now this road back to the camping area would zigzag through the square-cut properties of ranch land. It's a narrow two-lane road edged by barbed wire and an irrigation channel, and minimal streetlights, if any at all. I can literally only think of one installed by the Dude Ranch out there. So we drive back to camp, having to use our brights due to the dark and making sure to keep an eye out for deer, and when we finally pull into camp, my mom immediately asks, "Did you see that kid in the swimsuit on the side of the road?" Perplexed and a little amused by the idea, I say, "No." "Where was this?" "On the side of the road." The cows were in close proximity. He was shirtless, walking along the road. I had been driving behind her and my dad. There is no way I could have missed this had someone been there. Nobody in our car saw him, and my dad said he didn't either when she initially saw him. Not shocking for my dad though, lol. However, also not shocking would be my mom seeing something paranormal. It always seemed to follow her, and she was dead, excuse the pun, serious. She even described the color of the shorts and his hairstyle and said he was walking the same direction we were traveling, so she couldn't see his face and had to be in his 20s. So we half-jokingly jumped to that conclusion that maybe it was in fact a ghost. After all, it was dark and late, nobody else had seen him, and even in the summer the Sierra are high enough in elevation and have crazy enough weather to easily kill someone who wasn't prepared for the cold at night, especially shirtless in swim trunks. On a clear night in August, I've woken up to temperatures in the teens. And where she was describing was in the literal middle of nowhere in these fields. It takes us about 20 minutes just to drive it at a good speed, let alone walk it to camp in the dark, but I guess anything is possible. The next morning we get up to learn my idiot friend left the cooler out after the rest of us went to bed, and a bear got a buffet out of us, so we decide we'll make the most of it and go back to town for supplies and some further fishing spots and get dinner again. This time on the way back to camp, I'm driving in front of my parents, zigging and zagging through the fields when all of a sudden there is a bright set of headlights on my ass. Looking back I could tell this had to be some sort of lifted truck, maybe a Bronco or similar, rearing up on my SUV, so close at times I thought we were going to get rammed. I start speeding up a little at first, but this car stays right on me. I'm starting to get annoyed and concerned. After all, this was a two-lane road at night that anyone wanting to pass could very easily and safely do so on, and there isn't any area you could really pull over without risking pulling into a ditch and getting stuck. So I continue speeding up, but I'm getting concerned because I know the hills are coming up and there are deer by the thousands in this area. But this car's lights keep pressing. My wife, then girlfriend, and friends start getting a little freaked as well, thinking about the backwoods BS asshole of a human being that is pulling this, and this continues through the fields until I get to the final turn before it goes from meadows to woods, and I get a real heavy gut feeling, almost like a scream in my head, slow the duck down. So do or die, I start pressing the brakes hard, fully expecting this truck to ram us. As I do this, we're coming around the corner, and sure enough, there's a pack of 6 or so deer in the middle of the road. I was immediately a little shaken up. It's always a little startling when you see animals out of the dark while driving, especially big ones, and then it dawns on me I'm not being blinded anymore and we definitely didn't get hit. I look back in the mirror, and the lights are gone. Just gone. No dust in the rear brake lights from a vehicle pulling off the road, nothing screaming by us in the other lane, and no road for them to have even turned off on or headlights lighting up the trees or area. And then I see my folks come driving up behind us. All of us are dumbfounded trying to figure out where this person went. The deer clear the road, and we make the rest of the drive to camp, and adrenaline admittedly gets me a bit irritated, so I start ranting off about how stupid this guy was and how we could have died, blah blah blah, really making everyone feel good. When we exit the vehicles, my mother promptly begins to deliver the customary parental admonition. I become increasingly frustrated when she labels me as reckless for proceeding so hastily on a perilous road in the dark, emphasizing how fortunate I am to have avoided a serious accident with the deer and insisting that I exercise greater caution in the future. Well, if that shithead hadn't been riding my back, it wouldn't have been such an issue. I say. What are you talking about? She responds. There wasn't anyone behind you? Oh, how the tables had turned. Fortunately, my wife and friends had shared the entire experience with me, so they began to chime in about the truck while I explained how I finally reached my limit, listened to my instincts and reasoning, and decided to slow down just as we discovered that the deer was gone along with the truck. It gave my mom chills, and she apologized but told me to be careful next time, but then started laughing and saying how weird the trip had been. I'll give this to my mom, she never did call us crazy for what we experienced in life, which is something I think a lot of parents neglect to do for their kids. It's funny because I always heard similar experiences from country towns back east or folklore of ghost trucks and thought how stupid it sounded, but now after experiencing it, holy shit is it dangerous. Plain dangerous. I'd never wish that on anyone. This road hasn't given us any issues before or since, but I'll admit I drive it with a lot more caution now. I always wondered if the shirtless guy and the truck were somehow connected but never found anything about it. Only God knows, I guess. My friend saw a man who appeared to be extremely out of place on 3 separate occasions in one day. 2 of the sightings happened at a distance that would have been impossible for the man to travel as fast as he did. Then he disappeared from a picture. 100% true story. These events happened in one day, towards the beginning of June 2020, in northeastern Minnesota. My friends and I had planned a day of exploring along the north shore of Lake Superior. Around 2 p.m. my friend, let's call him E, left his house to pick up our other friend, C, and then me. There is a weird 5-way intersection in our town, and as he drove through, E saw a man standing on the side of the road who seemed out of place. The man was wearing a clean black suit, a red tie, and dark sunglasses and had a brown briefcase/leather bag in one hand. He was white, had prominent smile lines, and had a longish, blonde Beatles-style haircut. When E drove by, the man waved one hand in a way E described as someone hailing a taxi. Not thinking much of it, E kept driving, and for a 2-mile stretch no cars passed him in the same direction, and he hit all green lights. When he got to the next large intersection about 2 miles away, he saw the same man, and the man did an identical wave. Later that night was when we measured it out to be 2 miles and a 3-minute drive from the 5-way intersection. Walking that distance would take at least 20 minutes. E thought it was strange but ended up thinking it was a weird coincidence or some people playing a prank. He picked up C and me and told us what happened, but we all forgot about it quickly and had a fun day. E dropped us off back at our separate homes around 8:30 p.m., and the sun was low in the sky by the time he began to head home from C's house around 9 p.m. As E drove to the same intersection as the second sighting, on the diagonal corner, in front of a telephone pole, was standing the same man wearing the same thing. This was the 3rd time E had seen this dude. Thinking fast, he rolled down his window and took a picture of the man. The light had turned red, so he had a little time. E then asked the man, "Hey, do you need something? Why did you wave at me?" Then with a straight face and even tone, all the guy said was, "The same reason you took a picture of me." As he was trying to wrap his head around what TF that meant, the light had turned green, and cars were honking behind him, so he kept driving and got home. As soon as he got into his house, he checked his phone to see the picture of the man, and he said his heart just sank. He immediately called C and me and sent us the picture before picking us up again to try to figure out what was going on. This photo is one of the most insane pieces of evidence for something like this that I've seen. At first glance it just looks like an empty picture of the sidewalk, telephone pole, and building behind it. No person standing there, just empty, but if you look closer, you can clearly see a human-sized and shaped transparent blur standing on the sidewalk directly in front of the telephone pole. Clear as day, no editing done, the rest of the picture is easily visible, and it is the only spot of the image that looks like that. Less than an hour passed between when we took the picture and when he picked us up again. We then went back to the spot, looked around, measured some time and distances, and took pictures at the same spot to see the comparison between the blur in one picture and someone actually standing there in another. We sat in the car talking about these events and couldn't come up with a solid explanation of what it was that E had interacted with. E thought government, C thought ghost, and I thought aliens. We haven't told too many people because of how crazy the story sounds. Some things that stood out: the man wasn't dressed for the 70 degrees minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit weather that day, still wearing his sunglasses around sundown. He was seen twice, 2 miles apart, within 3 minutes. He was never seen moving. Always standing in one spot during the third sighting, E had seen the man, taken a picture of him, and talked to him, and the man acknowledged E taking the picture. A picture was taken of the man, and he knew it but was gone from the picture immediately after. What was with the weird cryptic response he gave to E's question? Why did E see him so many times? Why would the man wave and acknowledge E if he didn't want to be seen/recorded? We have all kept a lookout and haven't seen the man since that day. I've traveled pretty extensively in the lower 2/3 RDS of California. There are a lot of little rundown mining/gas station towns out in the desert that could be classified as creepy but don't really give off a cult vibe or really anything other than just a town that once was. Most towns that could be classified like this aren't in California, but the ones that are located on the eastern half of the state. Anyone who's traveled along the 395, or any of the lesser-known freeways that offshoot it, knows there isn't a whole lot out there except the road trip traffic and gas stations to accompany them. The town that gave my girlfriend and me weird vibes is Trona, located on the route from LA to Death Valley. Upon first glance, it doesn't look distinctly unusual, other than the gargantuan chemical mining plant in the center of it. A gigantic white building, maybe 7 stories tall. This kind of thing isn't super unusual out in the desert, but it's usually in a much larger town with real infrastructure and a much larger population. This town may have 1,500 to 2,000 people, according to Google, most of whom I assume work for the plant. As you drive through the town on surprisingly lovely pavement, you start to see homes, not new developments but not ancient. There's white industrial equipment, white mining posts, and white chemical lines all redirected to the large plant, and many small smokestacks releasing some kind of chemical, which smells very distinctly sour. 2 gas stations appear on the left, one looks abandoned but still has working gas pumps, and there's a convenience store that's not open at noon on a Saturday. The next gas station over looks like your average Wild West themed road trip gas station and convenience store. We stopped, got gas, and had no unusual interactions. As far as I could tell, it was the only business open to the public in the whole town. After we got going again, we crossed a train track, and the town did a 180 right after. The road quality dissolves into near disrepair. The post office looked like a poorly designed cobblestone Minecraft hut, like the one you'd build when you were 10. There was a mineral museum, which looked like someone turned their one-story 1930s wraparound porch home into. There were hundreds of dilapidated wooden shacks that lay abandoned in between hundreds more mobile homes that looked similarly forgotten. The weirdest part to me was the school. It looked almost brand new. Like new, built in the last 10 years. The only issue being that it was also similarly abandoned. There were 2 or 3 destroyed school buses parked inside the main courtyard, trash everywhere, boarded up windows, graffiti, and an electric signpost above the main entrance that was still turned on. Probably overrun by squatters, or just some hoarder bought it and likes to live in an abandoned school. It looked like they had built the whole thing for a movie set and just left it. It's possible there was another high school in the town, but I find it hard to believe a town this small would build a really nice school and just go back to the one they were using before and leave it to rot. The online article mentions it has a dirt football field called the Pit, and they mention it more than any other detail in the entire article. They mention it, 6 times. I'm sure this place isn't as weird as it seemed driving through, but it's kind of the only place that really gave me for real cult vibes out of any of these small, run-down towns I've driven through. I can't quite pinpoint the reason, but I believe it's a combination of commercial dominance and the town's apparent squatter population. At least it looked that way just passing through to Death Valley. I'd like to stop by and spend some more time to get a better feel of the place, maybe visit the Gem and Mineral Museum. That's about it. I currently live in Colorado Springs but grew up in Salida, which is fairly close to the San Luis Valley. I have 3 stories to share based on my experiences over the years. When I was very young, my mother and I were heading back towards Salida from Colorado Springs at night. We were in the Bighorn Sheep Canyon between Cannon City and Salida, pretty close to Cotopaxi, Colorado. Suddenly I look up, and I see what appear to be 3 bright white lights in the shape of a triangle perfectly matching our speed and hovering about 70 to 100 feet above our car but just far enough ahead to get a view from the windshield. The center appeared to have a darker void, almost as if it were used as a hatch for entry/exit, but you really couldn't make out any defining features besides the 3 lights. I said, "Mom, do you see that?" She looked up for a moment and did get to see it for a moment. But when I looked back up again, the object was gone. A few years back I randomly met a guy who drew this and used it as his signature when he was checking out at a store I went to, and I had to ask him about it. He told me about his sighting, and it was the exact same description, but he was outside smoking and observed it moving slowly until it was suddenly gone in a flash. The second story was many years later but still with my mother and essentially the exact same area. In fact, all 3 of these stories are in the Bighorn Canyon. This time around I had been living in Colorado Springs and was in high school but went to Salida to visit my family and friends. It was during the middle of the day, and we were in Coaldale, Colorado, which is a tiny town between Howard and Cotopaxi. As we entered Coaldale, I looked towards the Sangre de Cristo Mountains like I always do. It's one of my favorite views in CO personally. I looked towards the mountains, and suddenly a very bright object was flying through the valley at a pretty low altitude. It was so bright I couldn't make out any shape whatsoever. It just looked like light reflecting off of a silver object, or the object itself was just very bright, almost like a mini ball of sun. It was flying about the same speed a small propeller plane would be, but I knew it couldn't be a plane with how bright it was. It flew slowly and at a low altitude for about 5 to 10 seconds, and then suddenly I saw this thing shoot over the mountains and out of view within a second as if it had shot into space to not be seen anymore. I didn't actually see anything during the third encounter. I just got the creepiest feeling, and it still gives me chills down my spine just thinking about it. I honestly thought I was going to be abducted, but luckily I never saw anything and ended up just fine. I was once again traveling to Salida in the canyon at night alone in my old Nissan Sentra. I was listening to music before entering the canyon, but as many of you probably know, cell service is lost in that area, so eventually my music stopped playing, and I decided to switch to the radio instead. For the first few minutes of listening to the radio, everything was normal. Then suddenly it began to get more and more static interference. I was just about to turn it off, and out of nowhere these creepy, otherworldly, mysterious sounds began playing through my radio. I literally cannot describe it well in words, but the best way I can would be like some noises from an old space science fiction movie, or if you look up radio wave recordings from planets. On YouTube it sounded pretty much like that, but kept changing in tone and pitch constantly. It was so eerie and creepy that I wondered to myself, is this about to be my next UFO sighting? But I tried to stay calm and continued to drive. Eventually the sound stopped, and the normal radio station came back on as I got into Coaldale. I recorded a video on my old phone, but I can't remember where I put that thing. I need to find it so I can watch it again. Hello, I am seeking help regarding a very strange situation that my father encountered last night. We do not have a single clue what could possibly cause this, and we can only speculate on this. We don't know if this was a paranormal situation or if it was just some random thing. Please help. Context: it was late at night, most likely at 1 to 4 a.m. My father was driving back home from Germany, following his usual route. He was well rested, never drank, and was wide awake the entire time, making sure that the road was safe. I'll write from my father's perspective. The whole trip went all normal until around 80 to 90 kilometers away from my waypoint, which is a city. Suddenly, in my rearview mirror, I saw a strange, strong light. It was around 400 to 500 meters behind me. At first, I thought it was the lamps belonging to a motorcycle. But it wasn't a normal light, it followed the exact movements of my car. I moved slightly to the left, and so did the light, at exactly the same time. For the next 40 kilometers, it kept appearing and disappearing suddenly. As if it was being deleted, wiped out. It wasn't just a regular light being turned off. In total, it flashed 4 times. After that, it was smooth sailing for a while. Then, the light appeared once again, this time around 150 to 200 meters behind me. It once again flashed 3 times and vanished. Later, it suddenly appeared right in front of me. Perhaps 10 to 15 meters distance was between us. I was terrified. I instantly stopped the car. The light stood. Didn't move an inch. After I processed what happened, I started the car once again. I wanted to move to the left lane to avoid the light and drive in front of it. At the exact same time I started turning left, so did the light. It was moving identically to me, my car. I was horrified but didn't stop the car. I drove for a small while in the left lane and returned to the right. The light appeared again, but farther away. At first I thought it was 2 lights close together, but after a while it looked like 4. The farther I drove, the farther it got and eventually disappeared. I drove calmly for a while, and it appeared again. Around 300 meters in front of me. It was approaching me head on at very high speed. At that time, I thought a collision was unavoidable. I turned on my longer car lights. Note, I am not an expert at cars. I am unsure whether I am explaining the long and short light modes right. Usually when I did that, I could easily see what was in front of me, even 300 meters away. But in that moment, I just couldn't. The light wasn't lighting up any surroundings. It felt like it was pasted into my eyes. But it felt real. Like it was there. When the lights lit, the light was going farther and farther away from me until it eventually disappeared. When I finally got to my waypoint, the sky was already turning lighter, and I never witnessed the light again for the rest of the trip. Please, if anybody has an idea of what this anomaly could possibly be and what it was caused by, let me know. My father is 67, and I and the rest of my family are very concerned for his health. My mother is going to take him to the doctor, as this has never happened before, and on top of that, while telling me and my mother this story, my father spoke highly unusually. My father stutters, speaks slowly, and his words seem to fade away. He has never spoken like this before, at least not from what I remember. I've been a long-haul truck driver for a good few years now. I find it pretty enjoyable, to be honest, it just suits my lifestyle. I've never been the most sociable person, so I actually really like the whole thing of it just being me, with nothing but my stereo system and the open road for company. My job has taken me to some incredible places too, things that regular 9-to-5 office workers just never get to see from their dusty, dimly lit office spaces. Even those with views from skyscrapers and stuff, they never see the landscape change, how the sun frames mountain ranges, or how the moon shimmers off boundless lakes. Even with all the built-up areas, this country really is beautiful in parts. Wyoming and Montana are some of my favorites, the mountain ranges and prairies being like picture postcards in places. But, and I mean no offense here, the Iowa cornfields get so tedious in places because there's literally nothing but cornfields as far as the eye can see. However, my least favorite place to drive in the entire country had to be Louisiana. Again, I mean absolutely no offense to any native sons of the Bayou State, I've had some of the best fried catfish I've ever tasted in little roadside diners while rolling through that place. But there's something inherently creepy about Louisiana too. Maybe it's just the humidity, the gators, or the way the Cajuns can just switch from English to French on a dime and shut you right out of a conversation. The whole Southern hospitality thing is as real as I'm surely breathing, and I really have met some of the nicest, most generous people in the entire country down in Louisiana. I'm talking about the kind of people that would give you their last dollar or the shirt off their backs. But I guess it's just a place of extremes, because I also met some of the least welcoming and, quite frankly, most terrifying people I've ever met in my whole life down there. And this here is the story of one of those encounters, one that still keeps me up at night sometimes, and that takes a few glasses of vodka just to shut the memories out. So this one time, I'm rolling along this highway late in the evening, way behind schedule on a shipment due in Dallas, Texas. The tight timing meant it looked like I was going to have to pull another brutal all-nighter to get my load to the depot on time. But if that was going to be the case, I'd have to stop at some roadside crawfish shack to fill up on greasy food and coffee so I had the energy to keep going. So I turned my truck off the road at the first place I saw, this place with a glowing luminous sign that flashed with half the letters missing, but it was all I needed to see. Rustin Crawfish Shack was the place's name, and it was little more than a collection of sheet metal shacks at the side of the road. But hell, those are the kind of places where some Cajun mama bear has been making the same delicious po' boys for the last 30 years, and God, I just love what those people can do with a few shrimp and a slice of lemon. So I order up my food, get it to order, and then sit outside to wolf it down before I get back on the road, when some older black guy comes up to ask me where I'm from. He was pretty friendly, and I don't mean to be judgmental here, but he had a very, very unusual appearance. He dressed normally and had close-cropped hair, but he was very, very skinny, like unnaturally skinny, Like he was just skin and bones with no muscle keeping his body upright whatsoever. I tell him I'm originally from up north but that I'm based in Arkansas for my job, and we start just casually talking about the area and its history. He was a nice enough guy, but I had to excuse myself, telling him if I didn't get this load to the Dallas depot on time, I'd be in a whole world of trouble. It's the kind of thing that guys lose their jobs over, so I could not afford to play fast and loose with my timing. And in my case, the risk was extra high, since I had a high-value load of electronics, new TVs and such, and every day a delivery is late, the depot can fine a trucking company and dramatically lower their bottom line. He puzzled over the thought for a moment, then told me he thought he could help me out, and to wait there for a moment while he fetched something from a back room of the shack. At first I thought it was going to be some pills that would keep me extra wired all night, but what he brought out of that crawfish shack was something that sends chills through me, even thinking about it today. The guy returned holding a piece of cypress wood that appeared to be freshly cut from a tree. He led me to my truck, away from the crowd gathering outside the shack. Once we were alone, he pulled out this huge knife and told me to carve my name into the wood, my full name, or it won't work. I was just about to ask him what it was when he shushes me, hands me the knife, and then tells me to obey. The blade looks jagged and slightly bent, like it's been home forged or something. That was creepy enough on its own, but it was only when I took the knife from his hand that I saw what the handle was made of. Have y'all ever heard of a jawbone knife? It's literally what it sounds like. The blade is obviously metal, but the handle is made of an animal's jawbone. In some places it can be made of a bear or cougar's jaw, with the teeth kind of blunted so they don't rip your fingers up. Although it sounds strange, these jawbone handles provide a great grip and were quite popular during the old frontier days. But this jawbone knife that he passed me was different. There was something horribly familiar about the shape and size of the teeth, the way only one of them was pointed, while the others were flat or jaggedly cupped. I thought it might have been a pig's jaw at first, but the actual jawline was way too thin for that. And it was with terror in my heart that I finally realized what I was looking at. It was human. That jaw had once belonged to a human being. I thought to say something, to ask him where the hell he's gotten his hands on such a thing. I mean, I wanted to shove him away and throw his wooden board right back at him. But I'm telling you, when a guy has handed you a knife that you strongly suspect is made from a goddamn human jawbone, you are nothing but polite to him. So, I did as I was asked. I carved my name into the wood and then handed him back the knife, all while he seemed to take an immense amount of pleasure in knowing how afraid I was. He then tells me that he's going to bury the piece of wood out in the bayou somewhere, and that once he'd done that, I'd get to Dallas with my load on time, and that I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Finland's roads are home to otherworldly close encounters. 1. The summer of 1955 took place in Kotka, in southeast Finland. The time was around 9:30 to 10 o'clock, and it was dusk this summer evening. On a road between Karhula and Haruksala near Kotka, a young man was driving his first car, an older Russian Moskvich 400, when in a straightaway in the middle of the forest, he noticed how three creatures resembling bears or penguins ran from the woods to the road some 100 meters, 110 yards, away in front of him. When he drove closer, the creatures began to gesture for him to stop, which he almost did. The creatures then at once ran to his car and tried to open the doors, which luckily were locked. They were dressed in a fur-like coverall, their hands were covered by dark mittens, and only their faces were visible. The young man was terrified when he saw that their faces resembled that of Chinese or Eskimos. Scared, he gestured to the humanoids that he would drive to the side of the road a little bit farther on and stop. When the beings let go of his car so that he could drive to the side of the road, he accelerated all his Moskvich was worth. The beings appeared to be angry, gestured with their hands, and then awkwardly ran several tens of meters, 30 to 40 feet, after his car. The driver returned with friends and other kids, but there was nothing to see. No beings or creatures were left there. Later though, he heard that others in that area had found that there was a place where the ground vegetation was all burnt, close to where he had encountered the humanoids. It was a round spot some 7 to 8 meters, 23 to 26 feet, in diameter. This is a weird case. Who were these beings the witness met in the middle of the forest? Were they humans? In that case, why would there be Eskimos this far south near the Baltic, and why would they have fur coats in the middle of the summer? And why would Eskimos attack his car? Or did he see some other kind of Bigfoot-like creatures? Was the burnt vegetation a landing spot for a UFO? Or was it all just a prank? Questions that we will never get any answer to. 2. The Flying Man. Between Tornio and Chemier, Finnish Lapland, May 1964. It was an afternoon in the early summer of 1964, and a 50-year-old Christian woman, who was very religious, was sitting on the passenger side in a car driven by her husband. When they were about halfway to Chemier, She observed a flying man on the right side of the car. The man was flying in a standing position with hands out in front of him some 200 meters, 220 yards, from the road and 300 to 400 meters, 985 to 1,312 feet, over the forest in the same direction as the vehicle. He was flying a little slower than the car was driving, 80 to 90 kilometers/hour or 50 to 55 miles/hour, so he was slowly left behind. The man was clad in a silvery or metallic suit and had a silvery helmet. When she later saw astronauts on TV, she said that they were similar to what she saw that day. She observed the man for 2 to 4 minutes and could see him clearly, but she could not see any planes or other vehicles in the air. Nor could she understand how he could be flying all by himself without the help of any vehicle. Her husband did not want to look at the flying man in silver, though she insisted that he should. Since the husband never saw the strange man himself, he never believed her story. 3. The black car and the man in silver. Near Turku, Abo, Western Finland, November 8, 1971. A 37-year-old female teacher was on her way home after work. It was cold and rainy, and she arrived at the bus stop at 8:45 p.m. She had waited for the bus for some minutes when a dark car pulled up and stopped in front of her. The passenger door opened, and the man in the car asked her where she was going. When she answered that she would be going some 20 kilometers, 12.5 miles, in the direction of Turku, the driver offered her a lift to the bus stop in her hometown. Strangely, she accepted and stepped in. At once she noticed something unusual. There was some kind of transparent magnetic or electrical field between her and the driver. The driver, whom she could see only in profile, was, in an odd way, elegant and of a slender build. She was astonished to see that he wore an outfit silvery gray in color. However, it was quite dark inside, so she was not able to see many additional details. The driver asked her questions about her work, about the pupils, and so on, displaying an unfamiliarity with school life. She also noticed that the car was driving soundlessly and some 1 to 2 meters, 3 to 6 feet, above the surface of the road. One other strange thing, no other traffic met them nor passed by, although the road was usually very transited even at this time of the hour. As they drove along, she could see the familiar landmarks outside. When they came to the bus stop near her home, she asked to be let off, but the driver said he wanted to continue the conversation. She refused since she had small children waiting for her at home. The driver then asked if he could continue the conversation some other time, but she refused again, saying that her husband would not understand and might be upset. The driver then asked where her husband was, to which she replied that he was in Sweden on a business trip, so she had to hurry and tend to the children, who were together with a babysitter. She said, "Good night," and then the driver also bade goodbye, after which the car door opened by itself and she stepped out. As she watched, the car vanished from sight, despite the visibility of over 1 kilometer, 0.6 miles, of straight road ahead. She suffered from hot flashes immediately after the encounter and later from a severe headache, a reddened face, and static electricity. This is one of those strange cases that involves a car, or should we say car? Because sometimes they are not of this world. Weird cosmic cars have been seen all over Earth in our modern times. Why do aliens drive around in cars? Or something that looks like cars? To masquerade, to blend in so they can study us? We can only speculate what the reason is. We also again see a case where a visitor asks weird questions about the ordinary life of humans. 4. A glowing craft was blocking the road. Chemier, northern Finland, early January 1976. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when a traveling salesman was driving his car on the Sakoava road toward Vaastamo. When he was near the outskirts of Chemier, close to the Niskala farm, he spotted a large disc-shaped bright object descending gently towards the ground and flying over his car. As this happened, his vehicle engine ceased to run, and he had no choice but to stop the car. The bright object landed on the road some 100 meters, 328 feet, away. The witness estimated the object to be about 4 meters, 13 feet, in diameter and 1.5 meters in height, 5 feet. It was shining brightly. A few minutes later, 2 small humanoids appeared beside the object. In the dusk light, the witness could see that they wore strange-looking dark green suits and were about 80 to 90 centimeters, 3 feet, in height. The 2 humanoids began to walk towards the witness car, but when they were about 40 meters, 130 feet, away, they suddenly turned around and hurried back to the object. The witness did not see how they entered the object, but it ascended almost at once straight up and vanished behind some thin clouds without a sound. When the object disappeared, he was able to restart his car again. He drove to the scene where the object had landed, and he found 3 landing marks, 5 centimeters, 2 inches, wide and 2.5 meters, 8 feet, apart. This is not the first time a strange alien craft has blocked a road. There are many such cases. Glowing craft has been seen many times as well. So you might ask yourself, why are some crafts glowing and some not? Different types with different propulsion? Some suggest so. We also don't know if there were other witnesses or if the landing marks were recorded. 5. Ghost car or space car? Vitali RV, Western Finland, December 8, 1993. A 45-year-old house repair worker had finished his daily work and was heading home to Nokia. The time was around 6:15 p.m. this December evening, and while driving in his car on the country road near Vitali RV, he first noticed that the surroundings were brightly illuminated. His first thought was that an airplane was descending, but when he looked up, he could not see anything unusual. After some time, bright lights appeared in his rearview mirror. On the next straight section of the road, the lights swiftly approached him from the rear and hovered just behind his car. Then the lights put some distance between them and his car again, but on the next straight part of the road, they raced towards his car in a second and passed it without a sound. The object behind the lights somewhat resembled a red car. The red color was glowing and was in some way transparent too. In the car there were 3 beautiful women with completely white skin, aged 20 to 30. As the car passed, they smiled and waved at the observer. Except for black eyes and mouth, they were completely white. Even the hair, which reached to the shoulders, was white. After the car had passed, it accelerated and vanished to the end of the straight part of the road, some 500 meters away / 550 yards, in a second. When the observer had driven a couple of kilometers, 1.5 miles, he noticed the car again. It had stopped on a downward slope after a curve. He began to brake cautiously, but then the object started to move towards the observer, and a crash seemed inevitable, so he braked all he could. Yet the object closed fast, and the observer was sure it would hit his car. Then, suddenly, when it was only about a meter, 3 feet, from his car, it stopped and vanished completely. Astonished, the observer got out of his car to see if there was some trace of the object, but there was none, not even warm air. Yet again we have a case with a strange, mysterious car, and this one is a little creepy. Who were the 3 ivory white ghostly females? Did the man see dead people from the other side? Or were they ordinary aliens? Or perhaps just 3 young women dressed up for a masquerade party? But it can't explain how they and the red car vanished before the man. Or maybe the whole thing didn't really happen at all? Don't sleep in your car at night. I've always loved long car rides. Even as a child, I was thrilled at the notion of relaxing in my seat while the outside world whizzed by me. This enjoyment didn't decrease through my adolescence. In fact, it only grew. By the time I had received my driver's license, I was embarking on small road trips every few months. These trips were simple explorations, such as visiting a nearby campground or a friend's house, but they gave me a feel for traveling. I had always simply slept in my car on the trips, since I didn't find it necessary to spend my money on some crummy, overpriced motel. Besides, at that time, I barely could afford rent. I had become decently skilled at it. Spotting places to sleep, creating makeshift tables and beds, and properly insulating my car in the winter months all became second nature to me. I had never felt unsettled, sleeping in my hand-me-down 2003 Chevrolet Impala, while the night sky turned to dawn. Instead, I found it serene, waking up to whatever picturesque landscape surrounded me. But my opinions have greatly changed from then. I doubt I'll be sleeping in a car anytime soon without the protection of a firearm. It all started when I decided to pay my parents a long-awaited visit. We were very close in my childhood, but we had grown apart when I moved 3 states away for college. I called them, and I arranged to see them the following weekend. I received time off from my work and began planning my route. I would be traveling from my apartment in Washington to their lovely 3-story house in California. I planned to sleep in my car around the halfway mark and then arrive at their home that afternoon. I packed my things and set off on the road early the next morning. I spent most of that car ride jamming out to my rock collection and investing myself in audiobooks and podcasts. As the sun faded behind the surrounding mountains, I began to search for a secluded area for me to park. After several minutes of looking, I found it, an old, abandoned rest stop surrounded by tall trees and the thick, mossy Oregon foliage. I pulled into the parking lot and stopped my car. I put my back seats down and created a makeshift bed out of my sleeping bag, a few blankets, and several pillows. I quickly fell off into slumber. I awoke at dawn and returned my back seat to its normal state. I got an early start as planned. Besides a little traffic, the rest of that car ride went off without a hitch. That afternoon I arrived at my parents' house, where they were excitedly waiting for me. We spent the weekend catching up, drinking on their deck, and swimming in their luxurious pool. It was quite nice to get to see them again after such a long time away. The whole experience was memorable and wonderful. However, I wouldn't be writing this if that's all that happened. The morning arrived when I was scheduled to leave, and we said our goodbyes. Navigating out of their city was a bit of a chore, but soon, it was just me and the open road. Night seemed to creep up on me much quicker. Before I knew it, darkness enveloped me. The tall, looming trees and thick bushes appeared much more sinister than before. They took on the appearance of thin, crooked arms, reaching out to grab me. I tried to spot a place to park, but this road seemed to go on endlessly. I became a bit unnerved, all alone in the darkness. Sometimes, I swore I saw dark figures in the bushes and hiding behind trees. I chalked this up to my exhaustion and tried to put it out of my mind. I still stayed wary and would glance behind my seat every few minutes. Finally, I spotted an upcoming pull-off, which I gladly took. At this point, I hardly cared where it went, I just wanted to leave that seemingly endless road. It led me to a desolate back road that seemed to have not been inhabited in years. I slowed my car down and parked on the roadside. I repeated my usual routine of making the bed. I lay down to rest and closed my eyes. Exhaustion overcame me, and I quickly drifted into sleep. Knock knock. The loud banging swiftly awakened me. I cautiously raised my head up. Hello? Hello, is anyone in there? An almost inhuman voice asked. I said nothing, too enveloped in fear to respond. I'm just looking for directions to the nearest town, he continued. I was about to say something, but then I wondered why someone would be out this late on a deserted back road in Oregon. I was hiking with my friends, and, well, they're gone now, he spoke with an ominous chuckle. Can you just open the door so we can speak face to face? Something deep inside me told me to not answer. In fear, I pulled my covers over my head. He then began to pound on the door, shrieking incoherently. This continued for several minutes before stopping abruptly. I breathed a sigh of relief. This victory was short-lived, for then the scratching started. Thick, ear-piercing scratching filled my ears. This continued for God knows how long, because I somehow fell back into sleep through the horrific sounds. I awoke several hours later in a sweaty mess of fright. Light rain poured down outside my window. I wasted no time getting back on the road, for I had no intention of sticking around that dreadful place. I got my bearings together and felt relaxed after I had driven hours away. That was until I pulled into a gas station. I stepped onto the pavement and breathed in the fresh air. It was very comforting to have other normal people around me. I was close to accepting the fact that I had likely imagined the events of the previous night. I peered down at my outside car door and froze. There, carved into the metal surface, were several thick, deep gashes. I promptly hurried out of the store and into my car and rode back to my apartment without stopping. This has been haunting me ever since I arrived back home. Paranoia has taken over me. All my blinds are closed, and I have at least one weapon on me at all times. I've researched possible scientific explanations, but this has yielded little result. I'm scared to leave my apartment complex, although I desperately need human interaction. I want to inform the police, but I already know my story would not be believed. Whatever lurks in the back roads of Oregon is still a mystery. I don't know what came to me that night. Neither do I know why it did. All I know for sure is that you should never sleep in your car at night. A Michigan trucker believes he encountered and shot the Dog Man. The Dog Man has been on the minds of Michiganders for the last 130 years, starting in 1887. One Michigan truck driver traveling through the Manistee National Forest 5 years ago had an experience with a creature at the heart of one of the state's most popular urban legends, the Michigan Dog Man. And it changed his life forever. Trucker Joe Barger, 59, recently recounted his story to the host of the channel What Lurks Beneath, which tells stories about the mysterious and supernatural. Even if you don't believe what I'm saying is truthful, it might be something you can draw on in the future in case you ever do have an experience with the Dog Man, which is an advantage I never had, Barger said in the video. He explained he thinks it's important for Michigan residents to be aware of what he saw. Barger, a 6-year Army veteran, was transporting a 43,000-pound load of paper from a mill in northern Michigan through the forest on his typical route when he encountered the Dog Man on an evening in June. He said he had never heard of the cryptid before the incident, which took place within 15 to 20 seconds at most. I would swear, as a Christian on a Bible, that this is all 100% factual truth, Barger said in the video. Leading up to the encounter, Barger realized while driving he had an air leak. Wanting to fix it before he got too far into the forest, he stopped to look at it. He found the air leak by the back brake chamber on the trailer. With the materials to fix it, Barger positioned himself underneath the trailer and began to get a bad feeling. I was hearing a vocalization that wasn't natural, Barger said in the video. It wasn't a sound I had ever heard before. I was looking around, and I saw some shadowing in the woodline. But there was plenty of light to see. It was nowhere near getting dark yet. I was in bear country, so I perceived the shadowing to be a black bear at the time. When he realized he could be near a black bear, Barger got back into the truck and checked out the air, which was good to go. It held, and it took me not even 5 minutes to fix, Barger said in the video. The woods continued to give Barger a bad feeling. But he thought everything was normal until he started driving again. He checked his driver's side mirror for any traffic on the 2-lane road at the bottom of a hill. There was no traffic. As he started going up the hill and looked in his right side mirror, he saw it was darker than it should be. There was a wolf head the size of my window, and my windows were down, Barger said in the video. He was trotting along next to me, and I was going about 20 to 25 miles per hour at that point. And he was stooping down on 2 legs, looking down inside of my cabin. I'm at 9 feet tall in my seat. His hands were coming up, scratching my windowsill. On my door handle I could hear his claws. Time slowed down, Barger continued in the video. I thought I was in, like, an alternate reality or something, because a creature like this doesn't exist in a reality I've ever known of, Barger continued in the video. I have heard of Bigfoot, and I know that to be something that is talked about. This is an entirely distinct entity. Bigfoot has nothing on the Dog Man, according to Barger. It has many sharp teeth, and the teeth on this thing were like brilliant white, Barger said in the video. 3-inch long fangs, bottom and top. Pure black pointed ears. It had yellow eyes. With human-like hands probably 14 inches across. It was at least a 10-foot fall from how it was stooping into my cabin. His yellow eyes were darting all over the place. And looking at me. How this creature looked was mad and determined to get to me, Barger continued in the video. He was sneering. He wasn't making any noises vocally. But his looks and the intelligence in his eyes said, I'm here to get you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Barger thought about trying to roll up the window, but he decided to focus on keeping the truck on the road. That is when he remembered his handgun. Barger pulled his .45 Colt strap to his waist and took 2 shots at the creature. He instantly went down, Barger said. I was looking at him as he was sliding into the weeds. I was at almost point-blank range, so I'm pretty sure I got him through the eye orbit. His head was huge. Everything on this animal was black except his teeth and his eyes. I wasn't really panicked, but it's the scariest I've ever been in my life. Barger, assuming the creature to be dead, wanted to turn around and check on the carnage to make sure he didn't lose his mind. About a mile up the road, he found a spot large enough to turn his truck around in. I wanted to make sure I ended it, he said in the video. I wanted to know more about what just occurred. As Barger was coming back down the hill, at most 5 minutes after shooting it, it was gone. In its place was a Jeep and 2 people. Barger said he was concerned that people might be in a potentially dangerous situation, so he stopped to talk to them. They give me a story that they were watching a few bears fighting each other. I was worried about them being outside with what had just happened. But I didn't want to let them know what I had just done, so I left. Barger thinks because the other people claimed to have seen 2 bears that maybe there could be more dogmen in the area besides the one he shot. I was really in shock for a good while, Barger said in the video. I was still driving the truck, and I didn't even know how I got back. I shouldn't have been driving the truck in this state of mind, but I wasn't going to stay around or park anywhere near there. It was the most terrifying thing I think anybody could go through. It was more frightening than any combat situation. Because at least you know what you're dealing with there. Barger had nightmares for 6 months to a year on and off. The nightmares got less prevalent as time went on, and he doesn't deal with them anymore. I'm in a lot better shape now, and I thought it was important to get this information out. That's why my story is out now. It just took me this long to get with the right people that I know have my back. Additionally, Barger claims the federal government is keeping the existence of the Dog Man quiet. After I got better from the nightmares, I had a family member tell me I should get this out to the public, Barger said in the video. So I spoke with a popular podcaster in the cryptid community, and since I preferred to remain anonymous, he took notes and narrated my story about 4 years ago. State police detained Barger at a scale house 3 months later, where he awaited the arrival of federal authorities. When federal authorities, first showed up, they were very intimidating and angry, he said in the video. I didn't know what was going on. They said, you ended one of our assets, and this is how things are going to go down. Barger knew the only thing he ended in the last year was the creature. This was their property, and they were mad that I ended it. And they were trying to get me to stop talking about it. They probably knew who I was from the narration story. In the video, Barger said the federal authorities threatened him, confiscated his gun, and shut his bank account off for some time. I stopped talking about it until recently, he said. This is probably another tool in their toolbox for military operations of some kind. And if they don't keep it under wraps, it won't be a useful tool anymore for them. The Dog Man has been on the minds of Michiganders for the last 130 years, starting in 1887. That's when two lumberjacks saw a creature they described as having a man's body and a dog's head. According to legend, the Dog Man appears to humans in a 10-year cycle that falls on years ending in the number 7, according to the Michigan History Center. Barger's encounter happened in 2017. Did I just see Bigfoot? I live on the Olympic Peninsula and have been here for my entire 18 years of living. Growing up, I've always heard of tales of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, or anything like that. Never paid that much attention to it because it wasn't that important. Anyways, the story starts a few years ago when I was with my family at Lake Tahoe, more like an hour away, but we were there because of Lake Tahoe, staying the week in a cabin. We were driving up to the cabin, and I remember sitting on my sister's lap and looking out the car window and pointing out stuff that I knew about, and she would just be the normal sister and half not give a shit and half be proud of me. My mom started talking to my sister, and it got her attention away from the window, which sucked, because immediately after she turned her head, I saw this lone footprint. I couldn't make out the details of it besides that it was a human foot, or something similar. Couldn't tell if they were wearing shoes, snow boots, or just anything that you'd wear on your feet. I was about to point it out when my mom called my name as well, and I forgot about it until the next event. I was now asleep in my bed, alone in my room. My bed was right up against the window, and anyone who looked in my window would see the foot of the bed facing the TV on the wall, which is what I think got the creature's attention, and the headboard up against the wall you were parallel to. I remember waking up very suddenly. Nothing on the TV woke me up, no noises, literally nothing. I try to go back to sleep, shuffling around, changing the pillows, when I hear the crunch of the snow outside. I do that thing when you're lying down and look up, moving your head so the back of your neck gets rolls, leaving your neck facing straight up and kind of arched. But anyways, I see these weird palish greenish eyes. Like white but with a slight green hue. Then once I make eye contact, I freeze. Like I can't move, I'm telling my brain to move, but when I go to do it, nothing happens. I think whatever I'm looking at sees me looking at it, so it very slightly squints its eyes, like to kind of hide them. It's also at this time I hear a noise stop, a very faint one. I didn't notice it before, but I can tell something stopped. You can't hear its presence, but you can hear its absence. I don't remember anything else about this night, except for something very strange. I can hear what sounds like someone taking slow, careful steps while what sounds like softly placing down stones of all things. Then I'd tell my sister about what happened, and she didn't believe me, obviously. But when I asked her to let me show her where it was, she agreed, and we went out. When we got outside, she picked me up, and I showed her what I heard and saw. These weird prints in the snow. This is where the weird sound comes in top lay. They're all the same three shapes but slightly different rotations. We follow them, and it just leads to the tree line, roughly 50 feet or so from the cabin. Then I tell her to go to the footprint I saw yesterday afternoon in the car. I think she was singing Teenagers by My Chemical Romance of all things. It annoyed me a lot because she listened to the band so much. When I try to tell her to shush and try to close her lips, she sings it louder until I point out the footprint I saw. She immediately stops, and she goes as pale as the snow. I remember seeing just how thick this thing was. It was the size of both of my feet and my sister's foot, width-wise. We put both hers and my feet parallel to it, and the footprint is still bigger, not by much but still bigger. Anyways, that's not what this is about. I just wanted to tell about my first encounter and what actually encouraged me to share this. But a friend of mine joked that I should share both of my stories to this once I told him about the encounter I'm about to tell y'all. But this encounter happened earlier today, around 5 a.m. I was back from a run in the woods. I'm at this trail marker and decide to take a break. I sit down against it and drink some water when I catch something out of the corner of my eye. What you're probably expecting. What I'm really hoping is that Bigfoot doesn't dart across the trail path and get to the tree line behind me. I obviously don't ducking like this, so I go and shoot straight up and start looking but not going anywhere. I'm too scared to actually go investigate. After a few seconds of looking, this large gust of wind picks up, and I think the creature took advantage because I then hear a crack of a limb behind me. I don't do anything about it because it was probably the wind that broke it. So I start to speed walk back towards the main road, making sure to look behind my back every other step. I hear what sounds almost like a bass to my step, hard to describe, Like a lower pitch of my step every time I take one. I take a step, and it makes my foot sound deeper, if that makes sense. So I test if I'm going crazy or not. I take a few steps, and it happens. Then I'm thinking it was just a coincidence, so I do this weird tap dance thing to see if it would happen. It didn't. I think the creature knew it wouldn't be able to do that or just didn't need to take a step because I wasn't moving. Forgot to mention that I was slamming my feet down when doing the tap dance thing, but not normal walking. I get really scared, so I just decide to bite the bullet and take one last jog towards the main road. I hear something pacing me again, but no thumps, just brush moving. I get to the main road and turn around, and I think this thing was teasing me because it stuck its head out behind a tree and looked at me and made this weird face, like it was showing me its teeth. Anyways, here I am, hours later, sharing this. Feel free to ask any questions, put it in the comments.